Chapter 2378. Duguyuma was stunned for a moment before she smiled elegantly. Her blue eyes shone like gems in the night as she said softly, "There are some things that make me feel uneasy. Since I can't figure it out, I decided to come out for a walk." Sue-yi slowly walked down the stairs. His ears twitched slightly as he heard Lu Ruashi's gentle and even breathing in the room. This made him feel relieved. He walked to Duguyuma's side and said, "Are you worried about the Devil Sword refining convention tomorrow?" Duguyuma nodded and told Sue-yi that Dugucheng and Duguhen's attitude wasn't so harsh in the beginning. Dugucheng and Duguyuma were sincere when they asked Duguyuma for help. Now that they were in the Myriad Sword Alliance, Duguyuma couldn't sleep at night and had a bad premonition. "Since we're here, let's take things as they come. Do you really think that I'm here to refine the demon sword?" Sue-yi said faintly. Both of them walked side by side with their breaths restrained. They walked out of the courtyard under the moonlight. Duguyuma tilted his head and looked at Sue-yi. He asked seriously, "Then why are you doing this?" "For you." Sue-yi blurted out. "For me?" Duguyuma's eyes widened as she looked at Sue-yi in disbelief. Her chest was heaving up and down. Only she could feel it. "Of course, it's also for Mu-yang." Sue-yi smiled and looked at the tall buildings. Sue-yi purposely chose to walk away from the center of the buildings and walk towards a mountain path. The two of them were speechless. Sue-yi, who was walking in front, let out a deep breath. His gaze was no longer as sharp as before. "You risked your life for me in the Gu Demon Forest. How can I not return the favor?" The moonlight shone on Sue-yi's tall nose. The perfect shadow made Sue-yi's eyes as dazzling as obsidian. Staring at Sue-yi's handsome face, Duguyuma was startled and turned his head away. "I don't need you to repay me. I did all of this willingly." Duguyuma pursed her red lips tightly. Her pure eyes were mixed with a trace of unknown emotion. Sue-yi didn't notice it. Of course, this was only what Duguyuma thought. To Duguyuma, this deeply rooted love had been lingering in his heart for many days. During the Tianfeng ranking tournament, for Sue-yi, Duguyuma opened his eyes to the chaos of the world for the first time. It was also for Sue-yi that Duguyuma saw the beauty of the world for the first time. This pair of eyes existed because of Sue-yi. Unknowingly, Duguyuma had also given his heart to Sue-yi. At that time, knowing that Sue-yi had disappeared in the explosion of Tianfeng, Duguyuma's heart was dead. She left the Sword Alliance and went to Tianlan City. After learning about the ancient demonic beast from Lan Balian, Duguyuma wanted to try even if she wasn't sure if Sue-yi wanted it. This was the only thing she could do for Sue-yi. Now, Sue-yi was back and married. He had Lu Ruashi, Duanmu Xiaoman, and a beauty in the demon realm to accompany him. She, who had always felt inferior and lonely, had once again fallen into a dark corner. Life had once again snuffed out her flame. She didn't know if she could go forward and get a warm hug. Duguyuma wanted to hide in Sue-yi's arms like a little bird. The darkness of the world disappointed Duguyuma, but she didn't know what to do if the last bit of light in Sue-yi was extinguished. She wanted to tell Sue-yi these things, but she knew that Sue-yi didn't need her. The pride in her heart had deeply imprisoned her. After returning to the Sword Alliance, Dugucheng and Duguhen's earnest persuasion moved her again. She wanted to see the man in her heart, even if it was just once. If the Myriad Sword Alliance really changed their mind and could help Sue-yi fight against the Long Clan, Duguyuma was willing to give it a try. She couldn't do anything by herself, but she was willing to push the Myriad Sword Alliance in front of Sue-yi to let Sue-yi know that Duguyuma was in Sue-yi's life. He was afraid that this was the only thing he could do for his sweetheart, given his lonesome self. "I'm willing to do these things." Sue-yi's voice was firm like a boulder, trying to suppress Duguyuma's chaotic heart. Duguyuma's eyes flickered. Countless thoughts and images flashed through his mind. At this moment, Sue-yi was already close to him. He could see Sue-yi when he looked up. Sue-yi and Duguyuma were standing very close to each other. The night was quiet and the wind was flowing. There was no one around them. The moon, like a jade plate, was their witness. Even the sound of their breathing became subtle under the singing of the night wind. It's late. You should go back and rest. Ruoshin is waiting for you. Duguyuma didn't know what to do. Su-yi looked at Duguyuma and sighed. As a reincarnated human, how could he not understand Duguyuma's thoughts? Su-yi sympathized with and felt sorry for Duguyuma. Duguyuma's appearance in his short time in this alternate world was undoubtedly the last. However, Duguyuma's influence on him was no less than any other woman. On the contrary, Su-yi's heart was moved by a woman who did not hesitate and was willing to do anything for the sake of her love and pursuit. He wanted to give her warmth. However, there wasn't much time left for them. Su-yi didn't have that much time to think about these issues. The Long family, Qi Nu, Shangguan Tianqian, Yun Jing from the outer region, his birth mother, and the Chaos Demonic Emperor made it impossible for him to stop and embrace the person who loved him deeply. For Su-yi, it was better to pretend that he didn't know. This was a form of protection for Duguyuma. Su-yi only wanted to keep a distance from Duguyuma. He wanted to untie the knot in Duguyuma's heart and help her walk out of the darkness of her life. Duguyuma shouldn't always be a tragedy. Yuma, I won't call you Miss Yuma anymore. Do you understand me? Su-yi's voice was low, but it was like the sound of heaven to Duguyuma. Those few words had occupied her whole world. Buzz. Duguyuma opened her pure eyes and said, Su-yi, I understand. I have a lot of things to do right now, but I know very well what kind of people mean to me. I will always remember the good you have done for me. No one can replace what you have done for me. Do you know that? Chapter 2379. Su-yi looked up. This was the first time he looked at this beautiful lady with such a solemn expression. She had a slender waist, snow-white skin, and silver hair that reached her waist. She had an aura of lightness about her. Her jade-like face was as beautiful as the clouds. I know. I can wait for you. Her voice was relaxed, and her tone was neither coquettish nor flirtatious. It was the most gentle tone a lady could give to her sweetheart. Along the Black Mountain Road, Duguyuma seemed to have become more relaxed. Amidst the dark blue mountain, the gentle and charming Duguyuma faced the moonlight and led Su-yi along. Along the way, the two chatted a lot. They talked about Duguyuma's childhood, and also talked about their thoughts and feelings. Tonight, Duguyuma's heart was unraveled. Su-yi smiled as he watched Duguyuma being so happy. Duguyuma should be happy. She shouldn't be troubled by her own matters. That was the only reason she was strong. She should protect the people around her and make them happy. If she wasn't strong enough, she should continue to cultivate and become the strongest existence in the world. She should dominate herself and embrace her loved ones. Duguyuma had walked this mountain path millions of times, but today it was different from the past. Duguyuma smiled happily as she walked in front. Her face was like a beautiful peony with a few drops of dew, which made her even more charming. Suddenly, Duguyuma stopped at a desolate spot on a mountain peak. That's the Great Sword Mountain. Su-yi looked in the direction Duguyuma pointed at. He could vaguely feel a murderous aura surging towards them. A gigantic mountain that carried millions of heroic souls stood in front of him. As far as the eye could see, this gigantic sword mountain that was even more terrifying than Tuntun's true body was like a courtyard. The mountain wind blew, whistling like the roars of the dead, causing people to tremble in fear. What's that? Su-yi asked softly as he stared at the countless silver light spots on the mountain. Beside him, Duguyuma nodded. The night breeze blew her long hair up. She had never felt so gentle before. She was like an orchid in the valley, intoxicating people. Those are sword lights. The number of sword lights on the mountain represents the number of people who have comprehended sword intent in the past 10,000 years. Some people successfully walked out and offered their swords to Sword Mountain, and some people never came out again. Counting, there are at least 1,000,000 people. Duguyuma faintly nodded. Then, Sui found a high ground and slowly sat down. He slowly closed his eyes and released his soul sense. A soul fluctuation that was hard to discern with the naked eye struck the heavens and earth. Instantly, Sui opened his eyes. His heavenly origin demon soul felt an unprecedented piercing pain. It felt like millions of swords were cutting his body at the same time. He was like a fish on a chopping board. It was not only the piercing pain in his soul, but it was also the fear in his heart. In front of this colossus, even he suddenly became small. Looking at the silver sword mountain in the distance, Sui could not help but take a deep breath. I heard that there are 10,000 levels in Sword Mountain. I wonder which level I have to throw the demon sword to before I can refine it? Sui smiled bitterly. According to the normal procedure, he would take the demon sword into Sword Mountain to refine it. Of course, the Myriad Sword Alliance would assist him. Duguyuma turned around and said softly, "Why don't I accompany you into Sword Mountain tomorrow? I'm worried about your safety. I'll be at ease if I'm by your side." "It's okay. You and Mu Yang can wait for me outside with Ruashi. If I'm in danger, Ruashi will need your protection." Sui looked at Duguyuma. Duguyuma nodded obediently. With a sigh, Duguyuma walked to the edge of the high ground. The piercing aura of the sword swept over. Duguyuma immediately regretted inviting Sui on behalf of the Myriad Sword Alliance. "Don't think too much. The Myriad Sword Alliance doesn't have the ability to trap me. Don't forget that I'm the first person in the Myriad Sword Alliance." Sui clapped his hands and joked. Hearing this, Duguyuma's long hair fluttered in the wind. Under the silver light of the night wind, he looked like an immortal who didn't want to be involved in worldly affairs, extremely beautiful. Duguyuma smiled and said, "Actually, what Miss Ruashi said during the day is what I wanted to say as well. I'm proud of you. Thinking back to the first time we met, it's amazing." Sui shook his head and smiled. During the Tianfeng ranking tournament, Duguxie brought Duguyuma along and stunned everyone. When everyone saw Duguyuma's cultivation, they were in an uproar. Later on, Sui made a bet with Duguyuma. In the end, Duguyuma, who was proud and arrogant, was moved by his strength. What kind of miraculous fate was this? Just thinking about it made one laugh. After that, the two walked back to the entrance of the courtyard. Duguyuma still felt that the conversation and meeting that night was like a dream. Seeing that Sui was about to leave, Duguyuma said anxiously, "Sui, if only I could have met you earlier." In the darkness, Sui's eyes were as clear as spring water. Of course, Sui had thought of this before. "Go back. Just watch the show tomorrow." "Okay." Until Sui disappeared again, Duguyuma still stood in the distance for a long time before leaving. Tonight's dream was so beautiful that Duguyuma didn't want to wake up. Even if it was just for a moment longer, Sui belonged to Duguyuma tonight. As Duguyuma's aura dissipated in the energy of heaven and earth, Sui lay down again and closed his eyes. In the groggy state, Sui's breathing gradually became heavier. The next day, the sun shone brightly in the sky. Sui and Lu Ruashi, who had woken up early, smiled at each other as if nothing would happen today. The two walked to the courtyard tacitly. Situ Muyang and Duguyuma were already waiting for them. Situ Muyang hurried to greet Duguyuma and Lu Ruashi. "Young martial uncle woke up early." "Sui, Miss Ruashi." Duguyuma smiled faintly. Compared to the reserved and quiet Duguyuma before, today's Aunt Yuma was more charming and charming. Lu Ruashi glanced at Sui and went to Duguyuma's side. Soon, the two became familiar with each other again. "I can't sleep in this lousy place. Hurry up and refine the devil sword so that I can go back." Chapter 2380. Sui glanced at Situmuyang, but his eyes were filled with love. Sui had always wanted to take care of this young brother of his. Situ Muyang nodded heavily and quickly walked to Su Yi's side as if he was telling him a secret. All right then. Grandfather and the rest are waiting. Let's go. Actually, I don't like this place either. I have never liked it here since I was young. It's too depressing. When it's over, the four of us will go to Yutian Palace together. I like it there. Sister, don't you agree? Situ Muyang emphasized the last sentence. Duguyuma was instantly called out. He stopped talking with Lu Ruashi and said embarrassedly, Yes, Yutian Palace is pretty good. After saying that, Duguyuma looked at Su Yi and smiled shyly. Lu Ruashi, who was standing at the side, looked at Duguyuma and Su Yi. She seemed to understand something and said, All right, it's getting late. If we want to go back, we have to hurry up. Suddenly, the four of them looked at each other and smiled. The Devil Sword Conference had officially begun. A burning battle intent rose in their hearts. Following the tree-lined path that they had walked through yesterday, the path gradually widened. With firm steps, the four of them flew over. As far as the eye could see, the dazzling sword mountain from last night was still as sharp as ever. The vast aura soared into the sky as if thousands of swords were flying at the same time. Waves of energy tore through the void, and ripples spread out, shaking one's soul for no reason. Grandfather and Lord Sword Master are already waiting. Situ Muyang pointed at the black mass of people excitedly and nodded at Su Yi. Looking at Situ Muyang's excited face, he, Lu Ruashi, and Duguyuma smiled tacitly. If they knew that there was danger here, there would be one less person to bear the pressure. It would be good to let Situ Muyang continue to be so happy. Soon, Su Yi and the others walked along the wide path and entered the field under numerous sharp and curious gazes. Their eyes were fixed on Su Yi as if they were staring at something new. Only a few of them were looking at Lu Ruashi and Duguyuma. 9 Swords Divine Ability. Is this the person from yesterday? Su Yi. I seem to remember that he was the number 1 in the Heavenly Wind ranking tournament, right? Yes, a man who can survive from Longsong is very strong. What? 9 heavenly swords? Even old ancestor infatuated sword only had 6 heaven swords, right? How did this young man cultivate? Is he a monster? Facing the numerous surprised gazes, Su Yi's eyes were as calm as an ancient well. He had long since become accustomed to such a scene. On the other hand, Situ Muyang was afraid that Su Yi wasn't famous, so he waved his hands in front of the crowd and announced loudly that Su Yi was Situ Muyang's junior martial uncle. The crowd was in an uproar as more and more sharp gazes were directed at them from all directions. However, when they looked at Lu Ruashi and Duguyuma, they became even more excited. Let's go in. Su Yi tilted his head and held Lu Ruashi's hand tightly. He looked at the few familiar figures at the foot of the sword mountain and strode away. On the other hand, Duguyuma stood firmly beside Su Yi as if he had nothing to do with the Myriad Sword Alliance. Dugucheng and Dugujian were displeased by this. Umo and Su Yi are getting too close. That's not a good thing. Dugurhen said faintly. His sharp eyes shot to the sky. Compared to Duguyuma, Mu Yang's reaction seems to be more abnormal. Dugucheng looked coldly at Dugurhen before he left the ladder and walked down the stage. Dugurhen's expression changed. Dugucheng's intention was clear. He could only choose one between his grandson and his interest. Sect leader Su. Dugucheng's voice suppressed the crowd. His voice was like a ferocious tiger coming out of the forest as the fierce sword chi around him swept across the sky. Suddenly, the huge mountain of swords behind him seemed to have reacted, and the weapons that covered the mountains and plains also started to tremble. The sound of metal continued to ring, and the aura was incomparably domineering. Buzz. At that moment, the hundreds of thousands of people in the crowd fell silent as they fixed their gazes on Su Yi and Dugucheng. Su Yi walked to the foot of the Sword Mountain. When he saw the full view of the Sword Mountain, His eyes trembled. It was only then that he realized how huge the sword mountain was. The huge peak was like a black longsword that stretched across the sky. It was domineering. Silver light circled around the mountain like mysterious runes. Looking up the mountain, one could vaguely hear the shrill sound of the wind and the roar of the sword chi. Sword Master Dugu, you're just refining a demonic sword. Is there a need to make such a big scene? Su-yi smiled bitterly. He let go of Lu Ruashi's hand and bowed to the experts in front of the mountain and Duguqing. Hearing this, Duguqing chuckled and casually looked at Lu Ruashi. Sect leader Su and his wife are giving me face. How can we not show the myriad sword alliance's sincerity? Moreover, the 9 heavenly swords have to show the myriad sword alliance what kind of talent is capable of crushing our sword alliance's talents. After saying that, the myriad sword alliance's disciples' eyes twitched. Their eyes were filled with excitement and killing intent. It seems that the kid has chosen the wrong path. Su-yi's heart sank. Duguqing's provocative words were too powerful. It instantly stirred up the hostility of the young disciples. Sect leader Su, you're exaggerating. In that case, let's go to the peak of the sword mountain and talk about today's refining of the demonic sword. Su-yi glanced at the crowd. Situ Muyang, Dugu Ganggumo, and Lu Ruashi also agreed to start immediately. In an instant, dozens of deafening wind-breaking sounds were heard. Stormy waves appeared in the void above. Bursts of light impacted the world, and a destructive aura instantly shrouded the peak of the sword mountain. Chi! Dozens of light phantoms instantly landed on the ground. Then, the fierce sword chi in the air cut through everyone's flesh as if it was cutting through flesh. The berserk pressure was extremely dangerous. Every expert that had landed on the peak of the sword mountain had activated their yuan domain, afraid that something unexpected would happen. Duguqing looked at the sword-shaped stone door at the peak of the sword mountain and introduced it to Su-yi. Sect leader Su, please follow me. Su-yi immediately felt a bone-chilling sword chi behind the door when he walked to the entrance of the stone door. If the terrifying energy was released, it could destroy the void in a matter of minutes. The entire world would crack and shatter. This is the entrance to the myriad sword mountain. I believe Umo and Mu Yang have already introduced it to you, so I won't repeat it. However, if you want to open the myriad sword mountain and reach the depths of the mountain, you'll need the combined strength of all our experts. We won't be able to accompany you in. Chapter 2381. Sword Lord, do you mean that no one from the 10,000 feet sword mountain will accompany Su-yi? Situ Muyang's eyes flashed as he asked anxiously. Muyang, it's not up to you to say anything. Duguhen reprimanded and pulled Situ Muyang to the side. Situ Muyang shook off his grandfather's hand, turned around, looked at the crowd, and said in a serious voice, "How terrifying is the 10,000 feet sword mountain? All of you should know better than me how terrifying it is. Lord Sword Master, I don't think it's appropriate for my junior martial uncle to go 5,000 feet into the mountain alone. What do you think, Sect Master Su?" Duguqing was not surprised by Situ Muyang's words. However, he was suspicious when he saw that Lu Ruashi and Dugyuma did not seem to be in a hurry. In fact, Su-yi had already given Lu Ruashi and Dugyuma a heads-up. Since they were already in the Myriad Sword Alliance, there was no reason for them to run away. Although they didn't know what Duguqing and Duguhen were planning, Lu Ruashi and Dugyuma looked at each other calmly. They smiled at each other with Su-yi in between. It was like a calm lake in winter. In their hearts, they were already mentally prepared to advance and retreat with Su-yi. Therefore, Su-yi did not have to worry about Lu Ruashi and Dugyuma. Today, Su-yi was going to lure the Myriad Sword Alliance out. With the 9th Heaven Sword's mighty move, Su-yi believed that it would not be difficult for him to leave the Myriad Sword Alliance safely. Sword Master Dugu, since you trust me so much, I'll be a coward if I back out now. I'll be ridiculed by the myriad sword alliance's experts. Su-yi smiled and kept an eye on Dugucheng's eyes. Various thoughts flashed through his mind. He had made up his mind. No matter what, since he was here, there was no reason for him to back out. Sect Master Su, you're really brave, Dugucheng praised. He waved his hand and the experts behind him quickly formed a hexagonal pattern. The long sword in his hand was held vertically in front of him, and dozens of sword chi figures stood in the air. Immediately, the entire space trembled, and a terrifying aura spread out. Open mountain. Dugucheng stared at Su-yi, his eyes surging with coldness as he spoke coldly in the air. The sword-shaped mountain gate behind him instantly transformed into a ferocious ball of energy, piercing through space like a rising sun. Clang! Dugucheng's voice was like a large bell, but it was quickly drowned out by the sword cry that soared into the sky. Crash! In the next second, in front of Su-yi's shocked eyes, overwhelming sword shadows burst into the sky. Suddenly, the wind and clouds in the sky surged. Dark clouds covered the city, and violent chi accompanied by countless sword shadows attacked the world. In less than 15 minutes, Su-yi looked around in the surroundings. The high sky in the surroundings had already been occupied and filled with sword lights. Golden lights glittered, and boundless light surged in the void. It was fierce and murderous, and the might of the heavens descended. Sect Master Su, please enter the mountain. The experts' eyes narrowed, and their voices were like iron as they roared at Su-yi. Then I'll go in. Wait for me outside. Su-yi smiled faintly and said to the two ladies. Then, he looked at the light shadow sword sect. Su-yi's eyes darkened, and he whispered to Situ Muyang, Muyang, take good care of Yuma and Ruashi. As soon as he finished speaking, Su-yi's fighting spirit condensed in front of everyone's awe-inspiring eyes. The ferocious demonic aura was like the arrival of a demon lord, and a large area of energy in the void gathered toward Su-yi. Clang! Hundreds of thousands of swords made ear-piercing sounds, and the biting pressure cut through the void. Everyone's eyes twitched, and the aura in their bodies surged wildly because of the destructive aura. Junior Uncle Master. Situ Muyang quickly retreated. His cultivation was not at its peak and his face turned pale. He clenched his fists tightly and his lips trembled as he looked at Su-yi, who had turned into a ray of light and shot away. Let's go down and wait for him. Yuma patted Su-yi's shoulder. At this moment, seeing that Su-yi had really gone in, Dugucheng and Duguxie could not hide their joy. Boom! A violent sound that shook one's soul was heard behind them. As the sword radiance was extinguished, the space collapsed inch by inch. Soon, the sword shadow mountain gate was completely closed. Mu-yang, follow me down. We'll wait down there. Duguhen's attitude became very gentle as he greeted Mu-yang. Seeing that Su-yi was in danger, the naive Mu-yang could not bring himself to smile. Judging from the current situation, Su-yi had refined the devil sword, and everyone had opened the gate. Other than the danger, there was nothing wrong with it. However, Situ Muyang was still uneasy. I'll just stand with Sister Yuma and the rest. Grandpa, you promised me that little martial granduncle is safe. Situ Muyang glanced at Dugucheng. He did not even look at his grandpa's face as he flew down the mountain with Duguyuma and Lu Ruashi. You! Duguhen turned around and looked at the closed gate. Immediately, a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. No matter what, Su-yi had gone in was the first step to success. Duguhen had tolerated his grandson's offense several times. Let's go. The show is about to begin. In front of him, Dugucheng did not care about the agreement between Situ Muyang and Duguhen at all. He led the experts and flew down the mountain. At this moment, the tens of thousands of eyes that were watching the battle trembled violently. Even their souls began to tremble. The fierce and murderous aura in the air was incessant. The sword radiance that was like the stars filled the dusky sky. Everyone gulped and their gazes wavered. Returning to the foot of the Sword Mountain, Situ Muyang, Lu Ruashi, and Duguyuma stood alone on a viewing platform. Countless strange gazes shot over from the side, but the three of them did not care at all. The people around them could not believe that someone would actually go deep into the 5,000 feet mountain to refine the demon sword. There were still 3 people here who were foolishly waiting for that person to return alive. From the expressions of the 3 of them, it seemed that they were very confident in Su-yi. They did not care at all that Su-yi had entered the mountain to seek his death. Aren't the 3 of them a little too confident? 5,000 feet. Even the deepest level of enlightenment in the Myriad Sword Mountain is only 1,000 feet. Maybe the 9th Heaven Sword yesterday gave that brat unparalleled confidence. There are indeed too many people who seek death. I don't know why the Sword Master and Elder Hen would choose this person to enter the Sword Mountain. I saw the 9 swords yesterday, but the path of the Heavenly Sword and the Myriad Sword Mountain are definitely not on the same level. This brat is definitely courting death. Beside him, Situ Muyang felt as if he was being stabbed by needles. He turned his head and glared at the crowd, his voice quickly becoming softer. No matter what, we can't embarrass Junior Marshal Uncle. If Junior Marshal Uncle is not afraid, then we, who are waiting outside, have to be more imposing. Situ Muyang gritted his teeth and looked nervously at Dugucheng and Duguxie in front of him. He waved his hand. It has begun. Dugucheng's voice suppressed the crowd. Chapter 2382. Ha! The crowd roared as thousands of fiery gazes shot into the sky. Dozens of Yuan domain experts exerted their strength at the same time and applied their dazzling soul energy to the Sword Mountain. Without the suppression of the weapon, the Sword Mountain trembled slightly and immediately intertwined with the energy in the sky. Bang! Bang! Soon, the wind and clouds surged in the sky. Under the crushing force, silver light danced and the mountain that stretched for thousands of miles became transparent and dazzling. Above the shining mountain, everyone's eyes were fixed on a fiery red light that rapidly descended. The violent aura swept through the mountain and did not weaken at all. 100 ren. 200 ren. 300 ren. 1,000 ren. The space along the way seemed to shatter as the fiery red light illuminated the ancient mountain. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Su-yi easily broke through the Myriad Sword Alliance's 10,000-year limit. Breaking the limit once again, everyone who had been discussing spiritedly just a moment ago seemed to have turned stiff. Traces of cold air swept past everyone, and no one spoke. Strong, so strong that it was terrifying. So strong that it made one's hair stand on end. Seeing Su-yi charging forward with an unstoppable momentum, Situ Muyang, who was holding onto the railing, was instantly filled with anger and passion. Young Marshal Granduncle is too strong. Charge. Charge down like this. Suddenly, Situ Muyang seemed to want to vent his anger. He turned around and glared fiercely at those who had spoken earlier. Who said my young Marshal Granduncle was courting death? Step forward now. His angry roar was accompanied by a beast-like stare. Situ Muyang's killing intent also surged. Situ Muyang heard everything that had been said earlier. For Su-yi's sake, he had to endure it and not show his panic. But now 1,000 ren. In the blink of an eye, Su-yi's valiance had once again slapped everyone's face. If Situ Muyang wanted to vent his anger and belittle him, he could cultivate as hard as he could to prove himself. But if he belittled Su-yi, Situ Muyang would be the first to disagree. Looking at the tangled faces, Su-yi's strength made them feel as if they had eaten a fly. Many of the people present had not seen the might of Su-yi's 9 swords, but at this moment, they were as silent as cicadas in winter, not daring to speak again. Say something, are you all mute? A bunch of trash, weren't you shouting so happily just now? Situ Muyang glared at the crowd and was eventually pulled back to the railing by Duguyuma. Why should we lower ourselves to their level? Duguyuma chuckled. At this time, a voice jumped out from the crowd and said coldly, "One of you is the disciple of the sword god, and the other is the disciple of Elderhen, but you are helping outsiders. What a traitor!" Slowly turning his head, Situ Muyang recognized that it was Zhou Yifan. Kuang Xiaoyuan, who was a tyrant and boasted that his talent and martial arts were outstanding among his peers. "What did you say, Kuang Xiaoyuan? I didn't hear you clearly." The powerful sword essence of a level 6 origin emperor flashed across his eyes. Suddenly, Kuang Xiaoyuan's throat rolled, and his high cheekbones trembled slightly. He mocked back, "It's just 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet. What are you being so arrogant for?" "That's right, Mu Yang. We are all fellow disciples, and you are helping an outsider. What benefits did Su Yi give you? We can see that you are the grandson of Elderhen, so we won't argue with you." "We haven't arrived yet, Mu Yang. Don't speak too early." Smack! Situ Muyang slammed the railing, and golden sparks flew in front of him. Situ Muyang immediately said, "Remember this. My junior martial uncle will definitely arrive. Just you wait." Turning back, Situ Muyang's eyes were cold as he stared at the transparent silver mountain. Looking at Situ Muyang's angry face, Lu Ruashi and Duguyuma felt gratified for Situ Muyang. Situ Muyang's love for Su Yi was true love. 2,000 feet. We're here. Situ Muyang shouted at the top of his lungs, and his yuan qi surged, as if he was showing off to his fellow disciples. After a while, the silver light in the transparent mountain became deeper as they went deeper. Everyone knew that as long as they had entered the 10,000 feet sword mountain, they would know that the deeper they went, the more torturous the pressure of the space and the residual sword intent in the space would be. An ordinary martial artist would stop at 1,000 feet, and that would be the limit. But now, 2,000 ren didn't seem to be a problem for Su Yi at all. "We're almost there. Our junior martial uncle will definitely shock everyone." Situ Muyang held his breath as he waited. Lu Ruashi and Duguyuma beside him were nervous, and their eyes were fixed on the changes in the silver light. How did this kid train his physical strength? And his soul energy? It's too amazing! Duguhen could not believe his eyes, and his dim eyes were filled with shock. "Won't we know everything when he dies?" Dugucheng narrowed his eyes. Dugucheng was also surprised by Su Yi's strength. But from his reaction, no matter how strong Su Yi was, Dugucheng was not worried. He looked at the changes in the sword mountain as if he was a fish in a jar. Dugucheng's expression turned playful. "Are we going to ask that lord to come out now?" Duguhen nodded, and his lips were slightly opened. His low voice was filled with strong killing intent. Dugucheng shook his head and touched his chin. His eyes flashed with slyness as he said, "It's not time to catch him yet. By the way, the other families should be here by now, right?" Duguhen replied, "They should be here soon. I didn't inform the Yun family because I was afraid of causing trouble." Dugucheng looked under the silver light curtain and saw that the light spot was still sinking at an extremely fast speed. He believed that it would not take long before Su Yi reached the depth of 5,000 meters. Dugucheng said coldly, "Yun Zhongli is not someone to be trifled with. He must be here to protect Su Yi." "Well, if the four families agree, the Yun family won't be able to cause any trouble." Immediately after, Dugucheng and Duguhen took a step forward at the same time. Dugucheng said faintly, "Make the arrangements. 5,000 Ren's men should be here by now. This kid is so strong, I don't know if the original array will work." Duguhen's eyes flashed, and he told Dugucheng that it was absolutely foolproof. Dugucheng nodded with satisfaction. "We have to catch Lu Ruashi as soon as possible. We can't let her get away with this gift." Dugucheng's lips curled up. At this point, Su-yi had completely entered the Sword Mountain and the myriad Sword Alliance's conspiracy had been completely exposed. Situ-muyang, Duguyuma, and the others were still anxiously waiting for Su-yi to reach the height of 5,000 meters. What they did not know was that 5,000 meters was the end of the line. Chapter 2383. After a while, Su-yi was sinking into the Sword Mountain. The pressure was like a tidal wave, causing Su-yi to feel even more pressured. He felt like he was drowning in water, and it was difficult for him to breathe. With 3 layers of defense, the pressure in the air increased as he went deeper. This was Su-yi's first time challenging an unknown danger without anyone's help. The Iron Soulfish was not around, Qi Feihong was not around, and even Ling Qianxue was not around. In the dark mountain, Su-yi saw something different from the outside world. Terrifying energy swept through the air, and sword essence soared into the sky. In the dark mountain, Su-yi had also raised his Origin Supreme technique to the maximum. He had a rough estimation of the depth. "I'm going to reach 5,000 feet soon." Su-yi was slightly shocked. Rumble! In the endless void, silver-white energy surged. It was fierce and murderous. The heavenly might covered Su-yi's body like a tidal wave. Chi-la! As the dazzling light flashed in front of his eyes, Su-yi felt as if he had traveled through space and arrived at another area. The surrounding golden space contracted and solidified. 12 huge silver chains seeped out from the darkness. Sharp and terrifying killing intent shot out. The chains gathered together and connected to a high platform. "That's it." Su-yi squinted his eyes. He had a bad feeling about this. Light flowed under his feet, and he quickly arrived at the high platform. He saw a man covered in blood with his shoulder blade pierced by the chain. His hair was disheveled and his breath was weak. He had fallen onto the chain and was unconscious. The moment Su-yi lifted the man's face, his eyes were filled with horror. A heart-wrenching chill spread throughout his body as he cried out, "Tian Chen." Looking at Shangguan Tianchen's miserable state, Su-yi immediately understood that Shangguan Tianchen had been taken away by the Myriad Sword Alliance. Shangguan Tianchen was severely injured and didn't react at all. The Myriad Sword Alliance had submitted to the Long family, and it was all a scam. Hiss! Su-yi sucked in a breath of cold air, forcefully suppressing the fury in his heart. A cold light shot out from his eyes, and suddenly, the starry soul and crimson dragon in his left and right hands respectively chopped towards the chains with a furious sound. "Tian Chen, wake up! I'll get you out of here!" Clang! Within the dim Sword Mountain, Su-yi attacked left and right, clashing with the chains. Instantly, a terrifying aura swept out like a stormy sea, and the monstrous energy in the air spread out like arcs of light. After slashing for a long time, the spatial ripples spread out like a hurricane, slamming into Su-yi's body. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Su-yi's vision darkened, and he staggered unsteadily. Glaring fiercely at Shangguan Tianchen, he let out a loud roar. At this moment, outside the myriad flaming Sword Mountain, over 100 powerhouses had already gathered, and all of them were operating mysterious hand seals at the same time. Terrifying energy collided and destroyed the entire void. The silver radiance of the 10,000 Jadefall Sword Mountain turned completely transparent, and everyone saw Su-yi cutting the chains inside. Instantly, most of the people present were puzzled, and they did not dare to say a word as they looked at Dugucheng and Duguxie. "Something's wrong." Before Duguyuma could rejoice, he immediately discovered the problem. The 12 chains were not ordinary, and they were imprisoning a person that he had never seen before. "That seems to be Shangguan Tianchen, Shangguan Shiwei's father," Lu Ruoshi exclaimed, covering her mouth as she looked at the mountain in disbelief. Su-yi looked like he had gone mad, staring at the chains. Situ Muyang immediately realized that something was wrong, and he shouted at his grandfather, Dugu Hen, "Grandfather, what's going on?" Isn't he refining the demon sword? Turning around, Dugucheng and Duguhen at the foot of the mountain looked calm. Before Duguhen could say anything, Dugucheng waved his hand. Men, capture Lu Ruashi and Duguyuma. Capture Situ Muyang as well. Sword Master. Duguhen raised his eyebrows, and his eyes were filled with shock. However, when he looked at the pavilion in the distance, he held back his words. Boom! All of a sudden, the young disciples who had been hooting earlier came forward and surrounded the three of them. Duguyuma's face turned cold and he said, "You have indeed joined the Long family. Why did you lie to me?" The Long family. Situ Muyang's mouth sank, and he looked at his grandfather in disbelief. "Grandfather, you lied to me?" Situ Muyang roared. Duguhen walked out slowly and he said softly, "If you didn't ask Su-Yi to come here, how could we have captured this demon?" Demon? As soon as he finished speaking, the entire place was in an uproar. Countless sharp gazes fell on Situ Muyang. Situ Muyang shouted loudly, "What monster? How can Junior Marshal Uncle be a monster?" Looking at the furious Situ Muyang, Dugucheng reprimanded loudly, "What are you still standing there for? Capture these three people." Bang bang! Despair flashed in Duguyuma's eyes and his aura surged. He shouted at Situ Muyang with Lu Ruashi, "Let's go and save Su-Yi." In the next second, light spread out like lightning, and Situ Muyang, Lu Ruashi, and Duguyuma rushed to heaven and earth. The swarm of people couldn't catch them. Dugucheng and Duguhen would not take action against the three juniors. Hundreds of people were exerting their cultivation on the Sword Mountain. Thousands of people went to catch the three of them. In the blink of an eye, the heavens and the earth trembled. The three of them sped up to the extreme and were about to reach the peak of the Sword Mountain. Roar! In an instant, thousands of people stopped and looked at a majestic man in the sky. He was tall and straight and his eyes were cold. Who else could it be but Draconis? Behind him, there were dozens of experts from the Long family. Situ Muyang, who had rushed to the stone gate of the Sword Mountain, looked at Draconis with fear in his eyes. "You filthy people used me and Mu Yang to lure Su-Yi into the trap," Duguyuma shouted. At this moment, she felt desperate. This was the biggest betrayal of her sect. In the sky, Draconis looked down at the three of them with a group of people. But his eyes fell on Lu Ruashi and he didn't say a word. Seeing Draconis come out, Duguhen gritted his teeth and stood up. He looked at his grandson and said, "Su-Yi is a person that everyone has the right to kill. Grandfather has no choice. Don't do anything stupid." In the blink of an eye, a fierce aura filled the sky. Situ Muyang's face was ashen. His grandfather had tricked him into sending Su-Yi into the trap. He remembered his promise to Su-Yi in the Yutian Palace. Situ Muyang was still persuading Su-Yi because he was his grandfather. Suddenly, Situ Muyang was so anxious that he spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 2384. Looking straight at Duguhen, Situ Muyang's heart was filled with hatred and regret. The situation in front of him did not allow him to have any doubts. The Myriad Sword Alliance had surrendered to the Long family. Grandpa and the Sword Master had taken advantage of Su-Yi's trust in him and Duguyuma to lead Su-Yi to the Myriad Sword Mountain. Situ Muyang, who had an epiphany, felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. It was no wonder that Junior Grand Uncle's attitude towards him was so strange. Situ Muyang also felt that it was strange. However, this was his grandfather after all. He would never put himself in a situation where he was disloyal and unjust. However, Situ Muyang was wrong in the end. As he thought about it, Situ Muyang felt as if his heart was being scratched by hundreds of claws. The burning feeling made Situ Muyang dizzy. Slowly wiping away the blood at the corner of his mouth, Situ Muyang looked at his grandfather, whom he respected, and laughed loudly. His shrill roar spread in all directions, and the surrounding air shook. "Ha ha ha, Grandpa, you lied to me so miserably. Mu Yang is really stupid. Situ Mu Yang clenched his fists tightly. His fingertips seeped into his palms as his cold gaze swept across the crowd. Hearing this, Dugerhen's gaze also darkened. He glanced at Draconis, who was standing with his hands behind his back. He gritted his teeth and said angrily, "I'll give you one last chance. Get down here. I can let go of today's matter. The Myriad Sword Alliance and the Dragon God will forgive your sins." Situ Muyang roared like a ferocious beast. His eyes were bloodshot as he fiercely retaliated, "But I can't let it go." Everyone was shocked. Many experts' gazes were cast on Situ Muyang. No one would have thought that Situ Muyang would go to this extent for Su Yi. Was he going to give up his life for Su Yi? "Mu Yang, do you know what you're talking about?" Dugerhen's eyes were gloomy, and his tone was very serious. He secretly raised his hands vertically, and 2 fierce Yuan Qi had already gathered on his fist. Situ Muyang sneered. His eyes were as calm as steel as he looked down at Duguyuma and Lu Ruoshi and said, "Sister, hurry up and save Junior Marshal Uncle. Leave this to me." Lu Ruoshi frowned. She was worried about Situ Muyang. Duguyuma pulled Lu Ruoshi to the front of the sword-shaped mountain gate. "Muyang is Duguhen's grandson. No matter what, nothing will happen to him," Duguyuma said in a low voice. The 2 women faced the sword-shaped mountain gate at once. Lu Ruoshi stretched out her palm and a golden light burst out. With a crisp sound, the 2 women were bounced back at the same time. "It won't work. Even the Myriad Sword Alliance needs dozens of experts to open it. There's nothing we can do with just the 2 of us." The pale-faced Lu Ruoshi shouted. "Move aside, I'll do it." Duguyuma pursed his lips. His crystal blue eyes were emitting a violent radiance. His body was surrounded by a violent halo, and a terrifying fluctuation filled the sky as he charged toward the mountain gate. Clang! At the same time, a series of sonic booms erupted on the vast sword mountain. Spatial cracks spread across the mountain at lightning speed. At that moment, Duguhen was approaching Situ Muyang from the sky. Everyone could see that even though Duguhen was using Situ Muyang as bait, he did not want to hurt Situ Muyang. He was still protecting his grandson. "What are you waiting for? Dugucheng, take down the 2 women!" Draconis shouted. Instantly, a destructive aura shrouded the area. Everyone could not help but shudder in fear. Draconis's strength was too powerful. Dugucheng, who was standing close to him, was shocked. The powerful dragon aura spread across the area and the invisible energy turned the area into a barren wasteland. Swish! Dugucheng gritted his teeth. Now that things had come to this, he had to do it himself. Without any hesitation, his eyes were like swords. A soul-shaking sword principle aura burst out from the sky. "Lu Ruoshi, Duguyuma, surrender yourselves." Dugucheng's silvery figure appeared in front of the 2 women in the blink of an eye. A silver sword edge gushed out from Duguyuma's palm like an electric python. It was extremely sharp and collided with Dugucheng across the air. Bang! Bang! Suddenly, the space in the void tumbled. The aura in the area surged and the sky shook. In the next second, a 1,000-meter-long ditch was formed. Duguyuma, who had crashed into the sword-shaped mountain gate, spat out a mouthful of blood and turned pale. He was not an origin ancestor yet. It was already Dugucheng's mercy that he was not severely injured after exchanging blows with Dugucheng. Looking at the weakened Duguyuma, Lu Ruoshi's heart was in a mess. She threw herself in front of Duguyuma and burst into tears. "Sister Yuma!" Situ Muyang shouted. Facing his grandfather, he also shouted angrily. It was the first time he had used his sword essence. He swept away the spatial energy and rushed back to Lu Ruoshi's side. "How are you? How are you?" Panting heavily, he held his sword with both hands and pointed it at Dugucheng and Duguhen. The people from the Long family were like gods, looking down on all living things. In Long Yang's eyes, everything before him was like a farce that was destined to fail. I'm fine. Muyang, find a way to open the mountain gate. Duguyuma's lips were red. She trembled as she climbed up from the crack. She looked at the people in front of her who were eyeing her covetously. Draconis stood upright in the air. His eyes were exuding a destructive aura as he looked at Lu Ruashi and Duguyuma. He was determined to get Lu Ruashi. However, Duguyuma's eyes caught his attention. Draconis said faintly, "The Myriad Sword Alliance can't even deal with 3 little guys?" Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, countless blazing thunderbolts and flames fell from the sky to the west of the Sword Alliance. The fireballs were like meteorites that broke through the sky, heading straight for everyone. In an instant, everyone on the scene retreated. Their eyes were filled with shock. Who the hell was this? Draconis, since when did the Myriad Sword Alliance need to deal with 3 little guys? Yen Mietien's eyes were filled with flames. A destructive aura suddenly shrouded the area. It's Yen Mietien. Yen Mietien is here. The people from the Thunder Fire Temple are so fast. They're so fast. Are they here to help Su Yi? I heard that Yen Mietien has pledged his allegiance to Su Yi. Everyone's eyes flickered as they looked at the fiery clouds in the sky. The scorching heat spread across the entire area as a destructive aura descended. Soon, a majestic figure appeared in front of everyone. Draconis narrowed his eyes as he stared at Yen Mietien. Yen Mietien's attitude towards him during the Tianfeng ranking battle had not been so aggressive. Draconis looked at Yen Mietien, who was flying towards him. Su Yi was able to make Yen Mietien go against him. Draconis could not help but look at Su Yi, who was in the Sword Mountain with a murderous intent. Yen Mietien, Su Yi is trapped in the Sword Mountain. Are you sure you want to go against me for him? Draconis said faintly. Chapter 2385. Yen Mietien's eyes turned cold when he heard that. Crackling sounds could be heard from his body. Looking at Su Yi, Yen Mietien couldn't help but scold. You guys have lived for hundreds of years. What's wrong? Do you need to resort to such means to deal with a junior? Have you asked the Thunder Fire Temple and the Yun family for permission? Temple Master Yen, Duguyuma cried. She didn't expect that someone would stand up for Su Yi in such a situation. She couldn't help but nod her head. Duguyuma, I've told you that you're the only one I like in the Myriad Sword Alliance. Today, I'll definitely help Su Yi. Yen Mietien waved his hand. Since you're going to help Su Yi, I'll have to help Lord Dragon God. Suddenly, a deep blue wave came crashing down from the 9 heavens, and a large patch of blue light filled the sky. At this moment, everyone, including Yen Mietien, could feel a chill that could destroy the world. The female voice that came from the depths of the void belonged to Yen Mietien and Duguqing. Draconis couldn't be more familiar with them. Tianjun Yi. Yen Mietien looked at the figure that was slowly descending from the sky. His battle intent and blood chi surged out uncontrollably as he shouted, "It's you again, B*T*. I haven't settled the score with you for hurting Su Yi the last time. How dare you show up here?" Ing Wuxiu, who was standing beside Yi, frowned when Yen Mietien exposed her. Yi looked indifferent and nodded at Draconis. She didn't seem to care about Yen Mietien at all. Today's meeting of the 4 families is just right. Let me tell everyone why this kid is a monster. Draconis stood with his hands behind his back. His gaze was indifferent. In an instant, everyone calmed down. Yen Mietien and the experts from the Thunder Fire Temple stopped beside Duguyuma and Lu Ruashi and looked around with gloomy eyes. Whoosh! Golden light flashed, and the shadow of a dragon soared into the sky. Draconis quickly landed in front of the 10,000 Sword Mountain. He pointed at Su Yi and Shangguan Tianchen in his hand and said, "This boy has a demonic sword in his hand. The demonic sword is indestructible, but he can control it." Why? Immediately, everyone present shifted their gazes to Su-yi. Could it be that he is related to the demon from back then? It can't be. I mean, how could he be so powerful? So he has such a background. If he's a devil, then everyone has the right to kill him. There was a lot of discussion in the crowd. Countless people's gazes gradually became serious and cold. Then, Draconis pressed his palm down again. He looked around and said in a deep voice, "Do you know who he is holding?" Draconis continued, "Shangguan Tianqian, a remnant of the Tian Yao school, and this remnant addressed Su-yi as the sect leader." As soon as he finished speaking, everyone's gazes flickered. What was the Tian Yao school? The Tian Yao School and the Tianfeng Martial Arts Pavilion were known as the two mountains of martial arts orthodoxy in the Tianman continent. They were destroyed by the 5 big families and the top forces one after another. On the surface, the reason for destroying the Tian Yao School was that it was the beginning of the demons, but secretly, it was because of the heaven-suppressing golden stone. It turns out that Su-yi is the descendant of the demon. No wonder. I was wondering why I didn't like him. Su-yi is from the Tian Yao school. Yi and Yen Mietian's gazes flickered at the same time. They hadn't expected this either. So, today's devil conference is not about refining the demonic sword, but this demon. Duguqing stood out and shouted loudly. Boom! Between the heavens and the earth, hundreds of thousands of panic-stricken people roared. The crowd was furious, and countless strong murderous intents floated in the air. Kill him, kill this demon. Execute justice on behalf of the heavens. Kill this demon and restore the Tianman continent to its former glory. Hundreds of thousands of voices boiled in the air. Draconis and Duguqing successfully stirred up the emotions of the people present. Pairs of blood-red eyes stared at Su-yi like hungry wolves. Temple Master, what should we do? The elders behind Yen Mietian lowered their voices. Yen Mietian's heart began to beat faster. Of course, he knew what had happened to the Tian Yao school. But the Thunderfire Holy Temple had also participated in that incident. If he said it out loud, wouldn't it be a slap to the face of his ancestors? Bullshit. Even if my junior martial uncle is from the Tian Yao school, what does he have to do with the demons? Situ Muyang suddenly stood out and faced Draconis in the violent waves of voices. His eyes were fierce. Slowly turning around, Draconis smiled and looked at Situ Muyang and Duguhen. Duguhen's eyes trembled, and he didn't dare to say anything. Then I'll ask Su-yi to tell you personally whether the Tian Yao school has anything to do with the demons. Suddenly, Draconis waved his hand. The sound waves swept across the sky and the earth. Soon, the Sword Mountain turned completely white. Draconis. Seeing the situation outside, Su-yi's fighting spirit soared and he shouted angrily. Seeing Su-yi, Lu Ruashi, Dugyuma, and Situ Muyang's eyes flashed. They knew in their hearts that today, Su-yi was in trouble, and they couldn't atone for their sins even if they died 100 times. Draconis looked at Su-yi like a winner. Looking at Su-yi's imprisoned appearance, he said in a low voice, "Does it feel good to be imprisoned?" Su-yi's face was ferocious, and his body was extremely cold. Yen Mietian, Yi, Duguqing, and the Long family were all present, except for Yun Zhongli. Su-yi said coldly, "What? For me, Su-yi, you're going to touch the 4 great families? You're really giving me a lot of face." Su-yi, you are from the Tian Yao school. Am I wrong? Draconis said faintly. Immediately, Su-yi's eyes became serious. The Tian Yao school was a secret in the Tianyan continent. It seemed that the Long family wanted to use the Tian Yao school to get rid of him. Su-yi. Tears rolled down Lu Ruashi's cheeks as she looked at Su-yi in the mountain. She was on the verge of fainting. Now, she only hated that she couldn't help Su-yi. She was too weak, and in such a situation, she didn't even have the strength to fight back. If you don't want to say it, I'll let the people around you do it for you, Draconis roared. His eyes flashed coldly, and his killing intent soared. A monstrous golden light rushed out, and in an instant, the whole sword mountain trembled. Ah! Shangguan Tianqian screamed miserably, and a large amount of blood spurted out. Shangguan Tianqian, who was already bloody, was now like a pile of mud, tied up by 12 giant chains. Soul-searching technique. Su Yi's heart trembled violently. Long Ao had used his soul power to search Shangguan Tianqian's soul. He was afraid that Shangguan Tianqian would really be crippled in the future. Yes, I am from the Tianyao school. So what? Su Yi shouted, his eyes bloodshot. After Su Yi admitted it, everyone's eyes became serious. Chapter 2386. Since you've already admitted it, I'll let everyone see if you're a demon or not. Draconis sneered. The 12 chains on the mountain suddenly turned black, and demonic chi surged out in all directions. Everything in the surroundings disappeared, and the black demonic chi shot out like stars. Seeing Draconis sneering at Su Yi's body trembled, and a demonic chi radiance started to envelop his body. The desolate aura was incomparably profound, and Su Yi instantly felt the surrounding flesh and blood being enveloped by the black runes. What's going on? Why is my demonic chi being controlled by him? Su Yi's heart trembled, and he hurriedly called out to the iron soulfish. The iron soulfish didn't react to the black light in the entrance, and Su Yi felt an extremely uncomfortable yin chi gushing out from his throat. Ah! In the vast void, the sound of wind breaking could be heard, and a boundless black fog shrouded the entire area. Awoo! Under the black ripples, the black fog seemed to be destroyed, and everyone's eyes focused on it. This is demonic chi. Seeing this terrifying scene, the surroundings seemed to have exploded, and the terrifying light in Su Yi's eyes trembled incessantly. When he looked at Su Yi again, the black light enveloped his body, and his aura fluctuated. When he opened his eyes, the wild and violent demonic chi instantly occupied his body. His eyes were like obsidian, shining brightly and piercing through the heavens. Draconis, let me out if you have the ability, I'll kill you. Feeling as if his heart was being tortured in a pot of boiling oil, Su Yi didn't know why the demonic chi he'd been restraining would listen to Draconis's command. Chi. Under the shocked and horrified gazes, Su Yi clearly felt that his spiritual sense hadn't been devoured by the demonic chi. But what was going on with the rampant demonic chi in his entrance? Hearing Su Yi's shouts, Draconis raised his deep eyes slightly and said to the crowd, "Everyone, did you see that? This is the genius you were talking about. Kill the demon son. Kill him. Kill. Kill." Each shout was louder than the last, and the surging sound waves resounded through the heavens and earth. Countless people woke up from their shock, and looked at Su Yi with eyes filled with killing intent. So, once again, the sharp shout blocked the mountain. Su Yi looked at Situ Muyang in front of him, but his mouth was blocked by the surging demonic chi, and he couldn't say anything. So what if my junior martial granduncle is a demon? If you want to touch him today, you'll have to run over my dead body. Boom! In front of him, Situ Muyang raised his eyes, and a fierce murderous aura drifted out. With an incomparably determined gaze, Situ Muyang looked at Su Yi and curled his lip. Junior martial granduncle, Situ Muyang has let you down. Today, Muyang will fight with you, even if it means death. Suddenly, energy erupted from Situ Muyang's body, and a blood-red murderous aura that had broken through the origin ancestor realm surged out. Muyang, no. This was the first time he felt despair. At this moment, there was only black and white in front of Su Yi's eyes. Using his spiritual sense, Su Yi could also sense that Situ Muyang was doing something impulsive. Before he could say anything, it was already too late. Oh no! Muyang has ignited his blood essence. Dugu Hen's gaze trembled, and his aura immediately tensed up. Whoosh! Before Draconis could do anything, an old figure came to the front of the mountain. Duguhen's ferocious aura swept across the area and swept Situ Muyang away like a whirlwind. Whoosh, whoosh. Most of the hundreds of thousands of people had already taken to the sky, and Yen Mietian was still standing in front of Duguyuma. The elder behind him asked, "Hall Master, are you still going to protect the Devil Son?" Yen Mietian's gaze was cold as he sized up Draconis. The biggest doubt in his heart was how Draconis could trigger the devil chi in Su Yi's heart. Su Yi was indeed from the Tian Yao school, and it seemed that the devil chi in his body was real, but how did Draconis know about it? Hiss! A cold aura surged out, and sinister dark clouds filled the area. Between heaven and earth, all kinds of vitality light penetrated the dark clouds. It seemed that today's battle was over. Yen Mietian's heart sank. In the void, Draconis's voice came again. "I don't care about Yun Zhongli, but Yen Mietian, I hope you can make the right decision." Draconis's eyes were filled with golden light. His extreme joy made him believe that there would be no more shackles on his path to becoming a god from today onwards. "Hall Master, you make the decision." Behind him, the experts roared, and their blazing auras blasted into the sky. When their eyes met Draconis's, they were particularly nervous. In this one-sided situation, whether the Thunderfire Holy Temple could survive or not depended on Yen Mietian's words. "If I were you, and the fire suppression heavenly stone was taken away by someone else, I would put that person to eternal damnation." Draconis looked at the experts of the Thunderfire Holy Temple. Immediately, the experts behind him withdrew their defense and looked at Yen Mietian in disbelief. The leader of the elders looked at Yen Mietian and said with trembling lips, "Hall Master, is the Dragon God's words true? Did that brat really take away the fire suppression heavenly stone under the Buddha Sea of Flames?" Yen Mietian ignored the elder's questions. His face was gloomy and his killing intent blazed. His strength at the 9th level of the Yuan domain realm made everyone's eyes tremble. "If you don't say it, it means you admit it." The elders of the Thunderfire Holy Temple were filled with despair. Were they going to risk their lives for someone who had stolen their treasure? "Hall Master, say something." The impatient experts' voices shook the sky. They all hoped that Yen Mietian would say whether it was true or not. "Draconis, you knew this day would come, didn't you? You didn't make a move because you wanted to take us down in one fell swoop?" Yen Mietian sneered. Yen Mietian's body grew larger as waves of fire soared into the sky. The sound of flames and Yuan Qi explosions filled the sky, but Draconis didn't care. His eyes moved slightly, and the corner of his mouth curled up. "And you guys, the water suppression heavenly stone has been taken away. Why didn't you do anything?" Draconis looked at Yi Yi. Yi Yi and Yen Mietian looked at each other from a distance. Yi Yi's figure appeared in front of Yen Mietian in an instant. Both of their faces were extremely ugly. Seeing that Yen Mietian hadn't replied for a long time, the experts and elders behind Yen Mietian revealed a look of disappointment. "Hall Master, forgive us for not being able to help you. Today's situation was caused by you alone. My Thunderfire Holy Temple won't take responsibility, and we can't take responsibility. Someone will take Su Yi's life. It's already benevolent of us not to interfere." Boom! The murderous aura of flames drifted in the sky as dozens of experts streaked across the sky and headed for the crack. Yen Mietian's eyes turned cold when he saw that he was fighting alone. He hadn't expected that one of his own would abandon him in the end. Chapter 2387. Aya, why are you all leaving? Yen Mietian, do you want to leave by yourself, or do you want me to send you off? Draconis sneered with his arms crossed. Bang! Bang! Draconis, don't push me too far. As soon as Yen Mietian raised his head, the energy of heaven and earth in the distance started to fluctuate. A horrifying space crack appeared out of nowhere, and two powerful forces rushed out from it. Elder Gyue! Yun Zhongli, you are finally here. Yenmia Tian Su narrowed his eyes as he looked at the two forces that had come to reinforce Su Yi. He nodded in his heart. Fortunately, he had sent someone to inform the two forces before he left. Otherwise, Su Yi would not have been able to survive on his own. Above the void, Yun Zhongli and Elder Gue looked gloomy. The situation in front of them could not be clearer. Yun Zhongli's eyes swept across the area, and a vast amount of white vital energy penetrated the black fog and shot out. In the next second, Yun Zhongli, Elder Gue, and the others appeared in front of Yenmietian. At the same time, the elders of the Thunderfire Holy Temple, who were standing above the space crack, stopped in their tracks. Let's wait and see. Temple Master is in trouble, and we have to save him. The leading elder stared at everyone and said coldly, Draconis, do you want to fight again? Yun Zhongli looked at Draconis, who was standing in the void, and his fighting spirit was boiling. Suddenly, Dugu Cheng and Yi Yi stood up at the same time and blocked Yun Zhongli's path. Family head Yun, can't you see the situation in front of you? Su Yi is a remnant of the Tian Yao school, and he took away the heaven-suppressing stone of water and fire. How can we let him live? Dugu Cheng said. Hearing this, Yun Zhongli's face twitched. However, when he looked at Lu Ruoxi and Duguyuma, who were severely injured, and Situ Muyang, who was being strangled by Duguhen, Yun Zhongli took a deep breath. You two are helping the evildoers. How can you say that the remnants of Tian Yao school have suffered a loss? After so many years, do you still choose to cover your ears and steal a bell for what our ancestors did? Yun Zhongli shouted. Boom. After being humiliated by Yun Zhongli, Dugu Cheng's eyes slightly sank and he coldly said, No one can have a peaceful moment after entering this muddy water. Yun Zhongli, you want to be a saint, but we won't accompany you. The corners of Yi Yi's lips curled up and her eyes were filled with murderous intent as well. She said, This demonic energy is all over the sky. I think you're helping the evildoer. After being reminded by Heavenly Lord Yi Yi, Yun Zhongli looked at the black fog in the sky and said angrily, If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. I've had enough of the aristocratic family's tricks. If you want to fight, let's fight. Today, no one will be able to harm Su Yi. If you want to fight, let's fight. After Yun Zhongli shouted, the experts from the Yun family all burst out with fierce vital qi. Instantly, the temperature between heaven and earth suddenly rose. I'll also join in the fight. Seeing that the Yun family was facing the Myriad Sword Alliance, Tianlan Sea City, and the Long family, Yenmietian shouted angrily and stood beside Yun Zhongli. Looking at Yun Zhongli, Yenmietian's eyes lit up and a fierce heat wave burst out from his body. Then, he said loudly, Old Yun, I'm all alone now. You won't abandon me, right? Yun Zhongli laughed and nodded at Yenmietian. He didn't expect that Yenmietian, who was always noisy, would be so tough at this critical moment. It doesn't matter. From now on, you'll have a share of the Yun family's achievements. Before he could finish his words, the sky shook inexplicably. They're back. Dugu Cheng and Yi Yi's expressions changed when they noticed that dozens of fiery lights were pouring down like a rain of fire from the crack. They immediately let out a soft cry. Immediately, everyone present saw the Thunderfire Sacred Hall's elders return to stand behind Yenmietian. Yenmietian's eyes trembled when he saw his fellow disciples return. You guys? The leading elder glanced at Draconis and Dugu Cheng. Everyone present immediately became alert. Temple Master, we're back to save you. We can't let the Thunderfire Sacred Hall be without a patriarch in the future. Yeah, fighting alone. Do you think the Thunderfire Sacred Hall has no one left? Temple Master, let's fight it out with them. The Thunderfire Sacred Hall's people aren't cowards. The expert's energy surged like waves, causing the surrounding space to ripple and surge toward the Myriad Sword Alliance. Soon after, the young experts present retreated several thousand miles. Everyone's eyes were filled with shock and horror. They knew that the 5 families were going to fight again in the Myriad Sword Alliance because of Sui. This kind of battle, where almost everyone was at the Yuan domain realm, had nothing to do with them. If they were not careful, they might even lose their lives. Looking at the experts in the sky, who were as black as locusts, and the terrifying airflow that tore the space into pieces, many of the Myriad Sword Alliance's disciples began to retreat. Their eyes flickered and their faces turned pale. Roar! The half-step Yuan Tian stage dragons might rippled in the sky again. The strange and sharp soul energy directly penetrated the minds and souls of the people and spread to the entire area. Immediately, the wave-like voices were suppressed and even turned into nothingness. Yun and Lei families, you too are stubborn. Today, I'll completely erase your names from the Tian barbarian continent. Draconis's roar like a dragon's roar swept across the sky and turned into terrifying waves that surged into everyone's minds. It's starting. The onlooking cultivators' faces changed drastically. They were afraid of being caught in the battle. The experts from the 5 families whistled and sent out Yuan Qi rays. The terrifying soul energy that was on the verge of destruction instantly filled the sky. Boom! The mighty soul energy wreaked havoc. In the depths of the void, fire waves, sword edges, waves, dragon's might, clouds, and all kinds of energy rays gathered together. The sky was filled with all kinds of terrifying explosions. A large area of the space was already destroyed. Sharp sonic booms erupted from the cracks in the space, causing people's souls to tremble. This kind of bombardment was the most extreme collision of martial arts in the Tian barbarian continent. Once an Yuan Emperor expert was bombarded consecutively, they would instantly turn into ashes. There was no chance for them to resist. Don't go too far. In the midst of the energy storm, Yin Wuxiu rushed to Yi Yi's side in a flash and grabbed her hands. His weathered and solemn face instantly sank. What are you doing? Don't stop me! Yi roared. The various experts around her were fighting, causing the void to tremble. Yin Wuxiu frowned. On his wrinkled palm, a faint energy visible to the naked eye pressed on Yi Yi's body. Instantly Yi Yi, who was in a killing frenzy, calmed down. Draconis is just using us. There's no reason for us to risk our lives for him. If you're wrong, then you're wrong. Isn't it good to leave a way out for yourself? If it wasn't for your scheme, would Sui be in prison? You should know how capable you are. Chapter 2388. Yin Wuxiu bellowed. In the wind, Yin Wuxiu's face was distorted as he glared at Yi. This was the first time Yin Wuxiu was angry at Yi in his life. Yi pursed her lips in the face of Yin Wuxiu's anger. Finally, she began to compromise and retracted the blue aura around her. Looking at the storm in the sky and the roaring golden dragon in the sky, the Yun family, the Lei family, the Myriad Sword Alliance, and the Long family were all fighting to the death. Yi heaved a sigh of relief and looked back at Sui. They looked at each other across the sky. Yi nodded with a cold expression. But I still have to put on a show. I must take Yen Mietian's life. Yi glared at Sui. Then, the blue wind under her feet rose again, and she rushed into the battle. Yi's body was as fast as lightning. She had already used all of her strength, which was close to the half-step Yuan Tian stage. She raised both of her hands and roared towards a huge fiery shadow. Yen Mietian, I'm going to tear your stinky mouth apart. Come on, bitch. Let's fight to the death today. Within the raging hurricane, Yen Mietian let out a maniacal laugh. Dazzling crimson flames rained down from the sky with monstrous might, rushing towards Yi. I'll help you too. Duguqing rolled his eyes. Compared to Yi and Yen Mietian's impulsiveness, Duguqing would naturally weigh the pros and cons before Sui and Draconis. Right now, all of his experts were focused on suppressing Sui, and the hundreds of thousands of disciples couldn't participate in this level of battle. Dugucheng was like a lone soldier fighting a battle. The Long family's matters were left to them to deal with. Dugucheng just had to protect himself. Then, Dugucheng volunteered himself and rushed toward Yi. The three of them fought fiercely. Crack! The sword swept the dust and the water and fire filled the sky. Under the extremely nervous gazes of the crowd, the three leaders of the aristocratic families fought fiercely. The destructive energy storm destroyed everything in its path. Many of the spectators had their flesh torn apart and their meridians damaged. There were even some who fainted on the spot. Soon, the entire void had become a battlefield for the aristocratic families. The scene was extremely chaotic. Rumble. Inside the mountain, Su Yi's mind was in a mess. Yi Yianing Wuxiu looked at him strangely just now, and now there was a battle between the five families in the sky. Looking at the void where Yun Zhongli and Draconis were locked in a fierce battle, Yun Zhongli wanted nothing more than to break out of his shackles and kill Draconis. Watching the battle in the void, Draconis was distracted by Yun Zhongli and could not split himself up. Su Yi could feel that the demonic nature in his body had begun to be suppressed. Sure enough, the demonic nature in his body was related to Draconis. From the looks of it, Qi Nu's demonic poison and the bloodbath in Songlan City must have been the work of Draconis. Draconis, I'm going to kill you! Su Yi shouted angrily. All of a sudden, Su Yi's heavenly origin demonic soul began to circulate crazily once again. Boundless demonic qi surged to the heavens and the earth. The rumbling power of the storm smashed directly onto the mountain and the 12 chains. Bang! Bang! In the dark, Su Yi tried again and again until his hands were bloody and his internal organs began to hurt. Still, it was to no avail. This was a 10,000-year-old sword will mountain. Moreover, there were hundreds of myriad sword alliances most powerful cultivators suppressing it. How could Su Yi break free from it alone? Sitting alone beside Shangguan Tianqian, Su Yi's mouth began to bleed. A sense of dread and fear surged in his heart. Looking up, Su Yi admitted that he had overestimated himself. His head was getting heavier and heavier, and a sense of dizziness began to spread to his spiritual consciousness. Suddenly, Su Yi felt the pressure of the myriad sword mountain beginning to change. The pressure of 5,000 feet was getting heavier and heavier. It seemed like the pressure of the myriad sword mountain had increased because of the battle. 6,000 feet. 7,000 feet. He did not know if it was a change in the myriad sword mountain itself, or if it was the myriad sword alliance's move to kill him. In the darkness, Su Yi was still struggling. Not long after, Su Yi felt his body beginning to split open. When the pressure reached 7,000 feet, it was as strong as the space-time storm. His flesh was dripping with blood, and it was too horrible to look at. Damn it, I can't get out. Su Yi's eyes were burning with anger. Looking at the battle between heaven and earth, he wanted to know how Lu Ruoxi, Duguyuma, and Situ Muyang were doing. And at this time, looking up at the terrifying heavenly might trembling in the skies, under the violent bombardment, besides the 10,000 sword mountains, all of the buildings had been turned into dust. Thousands of miles of deep ravines could be seen everywhere, causing one's heart to tremble. The pressure of the myriad sword mountain is increasing. Duguyuma spat out a mouthful of blood as he supported himself on the ground. Through his crystal blue eyes, Duguyuma's pale face was filled with shock. Su Yi, I want to save Su Yi. Sitting up, Lu Ruoxi's eyes rippled as she wailed. At this moment, she and Duguyuma were both lying in the ravine with wounds all over their bodies, but they didn't care. Lu Ruoxi knew that no matter if Yun Zhongli or Draconis won today, Su Yi would be dead by then and Situ Muyang would be under Duguhen's control. She was the only one who could save Su Yi. But how am I going to save him? How am I going to save him? Lu Ruoxi roared and slammed her fist on the myriad sword mountain. The sharp blade instantly cut her jade-like skin, causing blood to spurt out. With trembling eyes, Duguyuma slowly stood up and looked at Lu Ruashi, who was in pain. Then, he looked at Dugucheng, who was fighting Yi and Yenmietian in the sky. A smile of despair hung on the corner of his mouth. Is this the ruins of my sect, the Myriad Sword Alliance? Today's farce was all because of me. Why did I put Su Yi and Lu Ruashi in such a situation for such a hypocritical sect? Why? What the hell am I doing? Duguyuma's tears rolled down his cheeks as he took a step back while trembling. Then, he spat out another mouthful of blood. In his mind, Duguyuma recalled the stroll with Su Yi on the tree-lined path last night. That was the first time he felt the beauty of life and the taste of love. Why did happiness and beauty only last for one day? Duguyuma looked up and saw a large number of Myriad Sword Alliance's disciples were killed. Their bones were shattered into pieces and blood rained down from the sky. Duguyuma's heart raced and he couldn't stop crying. Master, did you save Mo, or just to see this filthy world? While roaring, Duguyuma's aura began to expand gradually. A strong spatial storm appeared in the sky and Duguyuma's aura expanded. The dazzling azure light seemed to be able to purify the world. Chapter 2389. Boom! At the same time, an even bigger golden light beam shot out from Lu Ruashi's body. The dazzling light kept flashing. This was an energy that shocked everyone. As the electric arcs spread in the surrounding space, Lu Ruashi's aura expanded to the extreme. An amazing aura rushed out from her heart. Under Duguyuma's gaze, Lu Ruashi stood up and walked slowly to the stone gate. Boom! In an instant, the energy in Duguyuma's eyes gradually contracted. In his eyes, Lu Ruashi was like a goddess who had descended to earth. She was surrounded by the light of the sun, moon, and billions of stars. Ruashi! Duguyuma cried out. Seeing Lu Ruashi walking forward, Duguyuma sensed that Lu Ruashi was consuming something to be able to unleash such terrifying energy. At this moment, Duguyuma was standing behind Lu Ruashi. Lu Ruashi's face was shrouded in light. Her slender palm was warm and translucent, as if there were mysterious runes lingering around it. She pressed it gently on the sword-shaped mountain gate. Boom! Heaven and earth lit up, and a river of stars hung in the sky. Under everyone's shocked gaze, the entire sword mountain began to shake violently. It was as if a light beam containing endless energy was shining in the sky. Bang! The mysterious and terrifying scene appeared again. Countless huge swords that were comparable to the stars were drawn out of the sword mountain. Countless piercingly cold sword rays hung above the void like a river of stars. The sound of swords rang out, causing the space to rumble endlessly. At the same time, a vast and boundless aura swept across heaven and earth. Looking at Lu Ruashi again, her entire body was emitting a mysterious light. There were even traces of purplish-golden light flashing around her body, and mysterious runes lingering around her body. At her heart, a seven-colored light gurgled out and rushed to the heavens. Suddenly, the seven-colored energy seemed to have endowed Lu Ruashi with endless aura. Under the perfect proportions of her body, this body seemed to be born to cleanse this ugly world. This is, under the blue crystal double moon eyes. Duguyuma stared at Lu Ruashi closely. He could observe more carefully. Suddenly, Duguyuma's eyes trembled. Looking at Lu Ruashi's glowing body, Duguyuma's body trembled. His body began to tremble as if he had seen the most shocking thing in the world. What is that? In the distance, looking at the sword light lingering above the sword mountain, many young masters let out shocked screams. Their hearts trembled, and a sense of horror arose in their hearts. In front of everyone, Lu Ruashi opened her palm, which was covered in mysterious runes, and opened the sword-shaped mountain gate all by herself. Bang! The moment the sword-shaped mountain gate was opened, Lu Ruashi stood tall and straight. A seven-colored stream of light flew across the world like a huge electric current, covering the entire sword mountain. because of the fall of the 10,000 flamethrowers Sword Mountain, the 100 or so experts at the foot of the mountain who were still trying to suppress the 10,000 flamethrowers Sword Mountain released howls of pain at the same time. Over 100 figures flew backward like kites at a terrifying speed. Looking at the 7 colors in the sky that could make billions of living beings tremble, these experts who had always been arrogant finally revealed astonished expressions. In the rolling sound, the battle between the Yun family and the Long family was about to come to an end. The other 3 families were fighting fiercely, and Yen Mietian was beginning to show signs of weakness. At this moment, the 7-colored light shot into the sky and suppressed all the energy storms. Draconis stopped his attack and shouted angrily, "Go! Don't let her use the 7-colored glass egg." 7-colored glass egg. As soon as Draconis finished his words, a terrifying scene appeared in the space. The 5 aristocratic families, Draconis, Yun Zhongli, Yen Mietian, Yi, and Duguqing, released dazzling light at the same time and raced to Lu Ruoxi's position. Ruoxi, don't. Su Yi knew very well how Lu Ruoxi opened the mountain gate. Looking at Lu Ruoxi sacrificing her life for him, Su Yi, who was in the darkness, felt a chill down his spine as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This was the scene that Su Yi did not want to see the most. Ruoxi, his dream, his beloved, was about to be shattered. In the chaos, Su Yi's tears dripped down and stained his green robe. At this moment, Lu Ruoxi, who was floating in the air, had already lost her consciousness. Her eyes were tightly shut, and no matter how deafening the thunder rumbled in the sky, she did not care at all. Her entire body was glowing with light, and she only had one goal, to save Su Yi. Yuma, sister, Ai is counting on you. The sword's gate is open. Go. Lu Ruoxi's voice was soft and gentle, and it flowed into Duguyuma's ears. That tranquility, that relief. Now that she could save Su Yi, Ruoxi was satisfied. Standing closest to Lu Ruoxi, Duguyuma's eyes were bright. She could not believe that Lu Ruoxi had sacrificed her life. Looking at the dazzling rainbow-colored light, those were the tears of Lu Ruoxi's blood. No. I don't want you to do this. Tears fell like rain, Duguyuma's body trembled, and she bit her lips so hard that they were torn apart. In the next second, 5 powerful auras rushed toward Duguyuma from the sky. Lu Ruoxi shot out a long and dazzling light again, grabbing Duguyuma like an invisible hand and dragging him into the mountain gate. Ruoxi! Ruoxi! Duguyuma couldn't say a word because of his crazy roar. Seeing the 5 masters arriving at the top of the mountain, Duguyuma shot out another strand of strength from his dried meridians. His aura was like the wind, and it firmly hooked Lu Ruoxi's ankle. No. Draconis hated that he could not be faster, and his eyes were burning with fire. Finally, Lu Ruoxi and Duguyuma, who had lost their spiritual sense, entered the mountain gate under the burning gazes of the crowd. The 5 figures looked at the closed mountain gate, and the heavenly aura swirled in the sky. The sun and the moon appeared at the same time, but everyone's face was as silent as death. The heavenly aura caused the mountain peak to collapse. At this moment, the myriad blade sword mountain started to shake again, and the towering mountain peak started to sink. Under the terrifying heavenly might, hundreds of thousands of people from the myriad sword alliance could not help but feel the urge to prostrate themselves. The 5 patriarchs could only stand in the air and watch the scene that was like the end of the world. The sword mountain is collapsing. This is heaven-defying. Are they trying to destroy the myriad sword alliance? The vast world was dark, and everyone from the myriad sword alliance had the same expression on their faces. They were shocked and horrified. The myriad blade sword mountain that had stood tall for 10,000 years had collapsed. Chapter 2390. Witnessing this scene with their own eyes, countless experts and disciples of the myriad sword union began to cry. This was their pride, the reason why they could become an aristocratic family. Because of the battle between the 5 great clans, because of Su-yi, it was all destroyed today. Amidst the rumbling of thunder and the trembling of the mountains and rivers, an old man staggered as he witnessed this shocking change. His eyes also became moist as he cried incessantly. Energy surged in the distance as the silver myriad sword mountain began to sink under the astonished gazes of the crowd. It was as if it never existed in this world. Born from the earth, it would also return to the dust. Buzz! Sharp metal clangs resounded through the clouds. Hundreds of thousands of sharp sword lights were thrust back into the ground. Looking at this dense silver sword formation, a terrifying disaster that could destroy all living creatures was about to descend from the heavens and earth. Boom! Boom! The sword lights rained down on the mountains, mountains, and the void. As long as one could see, there were traces of people fleeing in all directions. The members of the Myriad Sword Union were like rats running across the street in their own homes and sections. They wanted to escape from this heavenly punishment. Was this the punishment of the Myriad Sword Mountain for blaspheming it? Ah! Quickly run! Is the Myriad Sword Mountain punishing us? Sword Mountain is destroyed. Does the Myriad Sword Union still exist? We are ashamed to face old ancestor Qijian, ashamed to face our ancestors. Amidst the fleeing crowd, the young experts covered their heads and fled like rats. However, how could they escape the might of the myriad sword array? Flesh and blood splattered everywhere as the dripping remains of the broken limbs quickly turned into fine powder and dissipated in the storm of the sword array. The old figures looked at the void and unconsciously knelt down. Looking at the sword lights that were like gods looking down at the gods, the trembling experts of the Myriad Sword Union suddenly came to their senses. Today, the Myriad Sword Mountain shouldn't have suffered such a calamity. PFFF. Tears streamed down the faces of the valiant and loyal warriors. Their yellowish eyes trembled. Even if they could escape, they didn't want to. The swords that had once been used by the sages were stabbed into their own bodies. Many of the old men looked up at the sky, casting their furious and hateful gazes at the golden outsiders. Dugucheng, Duguhen, and Draconis, you must atone for your sins in the name of Tian Fa. Dong dong! After a few sounds, the ground could no longer withstand such a terrifying sword wave. Countless terrifying cracks suddenly formed, and the experts who were hit by the giant sword all chose to fall into the ravines. Die with the mountain, protect the sword with the heart. The Myriad Sword Alliance will last forever. Their voices shook the heavens. There were quite a few people who chose to be buried with their loved ones in this way. Watching from afar, Situ Muyang's face was ashen as tears streamed down his face. As he gazed at this chaotic world, even the usually optimistic Situ Muyang fell silent. Little martial uncle, Sister Yuma, and Sister Ruashin had all followed the 1,000-feet sword mountain to the core of the earth. The world was vast and the Sword Alliance had collapsed. Where was the time of return in this boundless sky, barbarian continent? After experiencing this, being betrayed by his sect and being deceived by his loved ones, Situ Muyang seemed to have grown up all of a sudden. Situ Muyang finally spoke. His tone was steady and calm, but there wasn't a trace of hope in his voice. Grandfather, can you let me go? Little martial uncle, Sister Yuma and Sister Ruashin have entered the mountain. Please, let me go. Situ Muyang was standing above the spatial crack just now. Now that everything had turned into nothingness and the world had turned into chaos, his heart had died along with it. Dugerhen was also stunned at this moment. His withered hands that were clamping down on Situ Muyang also dropped. The world had collapsed, and the mountains and rivers were covered in blood and fire. The inverted mountains, rivers, and stars were all destroyed. The void and the earth were all shattered. Was this still the Myriad Sword Alliance that Dugerhen was most proud of? The Myriad Sword Alliance had already been destroyed. Even if he recovered his strength and obtained supreme martial arts, what was the use? Dugurhen laughed bitterly. His bark-like lips curled into a cold smile. His blood-red eyes were like that of a wild beast as he stared at Dugucheng in the distance. Dugucheng, you better give me an explanation. At the same time, Dugucheng, who had been stunned by the shattered mountains and rivers before him, regained his composure. A sword light shot out from his shrunken pupils, and in the next second, Duguhen's figure had already arrived in front of Dugucheng. Their eyes met, and fear and anger collided. Yen Mietian and Yi Yi, who were standing at the side, were also shocked. They looked at each other and returned to Yun Zhongli and Ing Wuxiu's side. I've been ordered by you, but you've made me a sinner. You can't absolve yourself of the Sword Alliance's destruction today. Dugurhen gritted his teeth. His blood and sword qi gradually surged up. Every strand of his hair was as sharp as a steel sword. Dugucheng took a deep breath and looked at Draconis. He heard Draconis say, "You'll deal with the aftermath. Su Yi is dead, and Lu Ruoxin is buried with him. There's no reason for me to stay here." Dragon God, you! Dugucheng's eyes widened in anger. He did not expect Draconis to say something so nonchalant even though he had destroyed the Myriad Sword Alliance. Dugucheng's lips curled into a smile as his shock turned into anger. You've been smart all your life, but you've ended up like this. What a joke. Dugucheng laughed loudly. Soon after, Yun Zhongli looked at Draconis and said softly, "Draconis, the hatred between us isn't over yet. The next time we meet, I'll make you pay with your life for Su Yi." "That's right, Draconis. It's not over yet," Yen Mietian said coldly. Turning his head, Long Qing's eyes were gloomy. A faint black light flashed through the golden light as his gaze fell on Yi Yi. Sweeping his gaze across the audience, Long Qing smiled in satisfaction. The enemy was dead, and there were no more obstacles in the world. What did Yun Zhongli and Yen Mietian have to fear? The Dragon God ceremony is in 3 months. That's the day I become a god. If the two of you want to be like the Myriad Sword Alliance, you can come. If you don't, I'll visit you personally after the ceremony. Yun Zhongli's and Yen Mietian's hearts skipped a beat when they heard the cold voice. Dragon God ceremony? Is Draconis really going to become a god? However, since he had said it so openly, Long Xing must have found a way to achieve the divine map's hegemony even without the golden celestial stone. At the thought of this, the 3 patriarchs gasped. Is the era of the Long family ruling the sky barbarian world finally coming? Bang! Bang! Dugucheng and Duguhen were fighting in the sky. Looking at the two of them, one of them had to pay the price for this disaster. Yun Zhongli said coldly, "Let's go. Is there really no hope? Is Su Yi really dead?" Yen Mietian's eyes turned solemn as he turned to look at the 10,000 feet Sword Mountain. A gigantic black hole appeared in front of him. The wind was howling, and the terrifying aura was like the chanting of a demon from hell. The 10,000 Swords Mountain has reached the core of the earth. Su Yi should have reached the core of the earth now. I'm afraid. Yun Zhongli didn't finish his sentence. Chapter 2391. That's it? I don't believe it. Yen Mietian's eyes were filled with hatred as he glared at the blood-colored sky. It was as if blood was seeping out of his eyes. The son of a god who could cross the pagoda sea of flames was killed by Dugucheng just like that? Yen Mietian's beloved disciple, Su Chun, and Yen Lin were still in seclusion, waiting for Su Yi's arrival. Yen Mietian's nose twitched as he glared at Dugucheng, who was running away. "Dugucheng, you bastard! Why did you have to drag Su Yi down with you?" The Thunderflame Holy Temple's experts behind him had witnessed Su Yi's feats that day. Now that they saw a heaven's pride of their generation fall, they couldn't help but lower their heads and sigh in sorrow. Yun Zhongli's back was facing the crowd, but he could understand the pain in his heart. If he could, he would have exchanged his life for Su Yi's. Without Su Yi, Yun Jing would be like duckweed in the endless star field. Yun Zhongli regretted his decision when he thought of his beloved Jing and his old friend Su Jingyuan. He wanted to scold himself for coming so late. "Let's go!" Yun Zhongli roared in a voice that was close to a roar. His body turned into a white light and flew away. Raging flame and azure wave quickly rushed into the spatial crack. Yan Mietian and Yi Yi sneered when they saw Duguqing being besieged by the Myriad Sword Alliance. "You and I will fight at the Dragon God ceremony 3 months later." Yan Mietian's eyes were gloomy. Although Yi Yi wasn't the mastermind, she was an accomplice. The 5 aristocratic families had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, so Yan Mietian didn't need to beat around the bush. On Sky Sea City's side, Su Yi was dead, so Yi Yi was even more unscrupulous. She smiled faintly and said, "I'll keep you company. I'll trample the Thunderfire Temple with my own hands." Yan Mietian spat angrily. "Bah! Bitch! You think you can do it? Listen to your husband's words." Yi raised her eyes coldly. The scales of victory had already tilted. Yan Mietian's words had no effect on her. Looking at Ing Wuxiu's steel-like face, Yi said softly, "Go back and explain to Lian. I have a feeling that it won't end so easily." After a long while, Ing Wuxiu raised his head. His eyes were calm. Ing Wuxiu had been running the Lingbao Hall in the 6 continents, 3 continents, and 1 ocean. He had seen a lot of people. Was Su Yi really over? Even if he was still alive, Ing Wuxiu was still unwilling to believe that such a peerless talent had fallen just like that. So what if I believe it or not? There's no way to investigate the depths of the Earth's core. Even if he's alive, can he come out? Yi shook her head. Ing Wuxiu was speechless. Yi patted Ing Wuxiu's shoulder and said softly, "Wuxiu, I know you love talent." But he had provoked an existence that he could not afford to provoke. The people of Tian Yao School can't be left alive. Ing Wuxiu's eyes dimmed. He curled his lips bitterly. He did not dare to imagine the future of Sky Barbarian. Let's go. The Dragon God ceremony will be the day when Sky Barbarian falls. After that, the people of Tianlan Sea City returned to Tianlan Sea with the good news of the fall of the Myriad Sword Alliance. The whole place was in chaos. The strong wind blew the debris, and the stench of blood filled the air. Anyone who smelled it felt nauseous. The only quiet existence was Situ Muyang, who was floating in the air. He carried the last bit of hope with him as he slowly came to the endless abyss. The dark abyss had no end. The suffocating feeling of not being able to see the bottom made Situ Muyang cry. Junior Marshal Uncle, when he met Junior Marshal Uncle for the first time at the Xinjian Gate, both of them were invincible and won the first place in the competition. After that, Su Yi's terrifying growth made him a huge obstacle in his path of cultivation. Situ Muyang cultivated with hatred, hoping to surpass Su Yi. He did not expect that he would send Su Yi into the abyss with his own hand. Patter! Patter! Situ Muyang knew that Su Yi knew whether the Myriad Sword Alliance was sincere or not. Su Yi was willing to take a risk for himself and for Dugyuma. However, Junior Marshal Uncle had underestimated the Myriad Sword Alliance. The Myriad Sword Alliance was not going to kill Su Yi. They were going to use the Myriad Sword Alliance and Su Yi to perish together. Situ Muyang swallowed his saliva and his eyes flashed. He wanted to go down and take a look, even if it meant that he would be crushed to pieces. Situ Muyang gently moved his feet. When he reached the edge of the abyss, Situ Muyang's eyes flashed with the determination to die. With a shout, he spread his wings and fell into the abyss. The white-winged armor protected Situ Muyang. The north wind sword intent swept past Situ Muyang mercilessly. In less than half a day, Situ Muyang was thrown up by the force of the earth's core. Thump! Situ Muyang fell heavily on the abyss. Invisible ripples spread out and terrifying cracks appeared. Lying on the ground, Situ Muyang looked up at the sky. His face was pale and blood was flowing out from the corner of his mouth. Let's try again. Situ Muyang did not give up. Whether it was his trust in Su-yi or his atonement, he felt that this was the only way he could feel better. Thump. This time, the time was even shorter. In less than half an hour, Situ Muyang was thrown up, but the fall was even heavier. The royal wind battlesuit was fluttering in the wind. The light spots were like stars floating in front of Situ Muyang's eyes. He reached out his hand to grab them, but a heart-wrenching pain surged up. Several of his bones were broken, and his flesh was trembling. Should he continue? This self-harming method was the only way for Situ Muyang to calm himself down. He tried 3 more times, each time faster and harder than the previous one. For the last time, Situ Muyang was lying in the center of the abyss. His eyes were blurry and his eyes were bleeding. His soul and flesh felt like they were being torn apart. The pain even caused him to hallucinate. Young martial uncle, Sister Ruashin, Sister Yuma. The congested blood was stuck in his throat. He coughed until he saw stars. His fists were already bloody and full of broken stones. Situ Muyang tried to grab the images of Su-yi and his 2 sisters in the sky, but he could not do so. Tap tap. A hunched and haggard figure walked to Situ Muyang's side. Seeing his grandson in such pain, Dugu-hen felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. Muyang, get up. I'll take you to treat your injuries. As soon as he finished speaking, a trembling voice came from Dugu-hen's throat. Situ Muyang, who was stiff and powerless, did not even look at Dugu-hen and flicked his arm away. His footsteps were light as he walked into the distance. However, before he could even take 2 steps, he fell down again. Falling, crawling, and falling again. Under the sorrowful gazes, Situ Muyang walked away. From today onwards, I, Situ Muyang, will sever all ties with the Myriad Sword Alliance. I am not related to Dugu-hen by blood. Chapter 2392. Situ Muyang had cut off all his escape route. Walking towards the valley in the distance, the mountain wind was bleak and the energy storm was mixed with a trace of bitterness. At this moment, Situ Muyang's voice was still hovering in the air. It was cold, decisive, and without a trace of leeway. Even if Situ Muyang's voice was incomparably weak, everyone who heard it knew that the Myriad Sword Alliance had become an eternal pain in Situ Muyang's heart. From today onwards, the Myriad Sword Alliance would be a scar that Situ Muyang would never mention. Elder Hen, should we bring Muyang back? With Situ Muyang gone, Dugu-hen basically monopolized the power of the Dugu Sword Alliance. Should they bring Situ Muyang back? Pairs of astonished eyes looked at the gradually shrinking figure in the distance. The experts stepped on Dugu-cheng under their feet and their eyes were incomparably vicious. At this moment, Dugu-hen seemed to have the whole world, but he had also lost the most precious thing. Standing in front of the crowd, the stooped Dugu-hen's mouth sank and his old eyes drooped. His wrinkled face was indifferent and he seemed to have become much more haggard. His gaze was fixed on the black dot in the distance as it climbed up and finally left his sight. Dugu-hen didn't say a word. He knew that there was no way he could save his grandson. The black figure had completely disappeared, and the vast Myriad Sword Mountain was only left with the whimper of the wind. Dugu-hen's nose turned red as he turned around and glared at the wounded Dugu-cheng. The Myriad Sword Alliance needed him. Compared to his grandson, their foundation of 10,000 years couldn't collapse just like that. Bring this beast back, Dugu-hen said coldly as he flung his robe. Viciousness and resentment flashed through the depths of his eyes. Yes, the experts responded. Surging vitality light poured into Dugu-cheng's body. Before they could say anything, Dugu-cheng fainted like a dead dog. After this battle, the Myriad Sword Alliance's strength had been greatly reduced. Although they were still much stronger than the Sacred Mountain and the Sky Dragon sect, the Myriad Sword Alliance had lost their status as an aristocratic family with the disappearance of their experts and the Myriad Sword Mountain. It was easier said than done to restore their strength. The 10,000 years of foundation of the Myriad Sword Alliance was destroyed in a day. Any disciple of the Myriad Sword Alliance would have the heart to die. No one knew how long it would take for the Myriad Sword Alliance to rebuild their sect. The path was too long. Everything was too small compared to this matter. Even if Dugerhen wanted to save Situ Muyang, it would be too late. Muyang, I know I'm in the wrong. You'll have to walk your own path from now on. After everyone left, the biting cold wind blew Dugerhen's long robe up high. His dry eyes were red. Perhaps at this moment, Dugerhen would finally understand the value of family love. If you didn't die, I would atone for my sins in my own way. Turning his head to look at the abyss, this abyss of Sword Mountain that made countless people's hearts ache, Dugerhen finally left behind these words. As for Su-yi, Dugerhen, after going through a great change, didn't seem to want him to die like this, and disappeared from where he was. Su-yi, who was 5,000 feet away, saw Lu Ruashi overdraft her life essence with his own eyes. At that moment, Su-yi felt like his heart was being bitten by thousands of ants. The heart-wrenching pain almost made Su-yi collapse. His eyes were wide open and his eyes were misty with tears. Su-yi had never thought that there would be a day when he would cry so miserably and painfully. When Duguyama hooked Lu Ruashi into the Myriad Sword Mountain, the entire mountain seemed to have collapsed. The fierce energy of heaven and earth surged into Su-yi's body. The entire mountain sank rapidly. The outside world was completely cut off. The mountain was sealed and the transparent silver wall turned into darkness. The world was dark. Su-yi could only see 2 rays of light in the distance. The 7-colored light was attached to the silver sword tip. Lu Ruashi and Duguyama were falling like meteorites. Ruashi Yuma! Su-yi shouted frantically, but he didn't get any response. Su-yi's heart tightened. He glanced at Shangguan Tianqian, who was pierced by the chains. The 12 chains connected to the mountain trembled violently. Because of the collapse of the mountain, the chains also began to tremble violently. Bang! 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 The huge chains shook violently. The murderous aura was like a heavenly reward. Su-yi was shocked. On one side was Tianqian. On the other side was Ruashi and Umo. But if this continued, the chains would break and the unconscious Shangguan Tianqian would die. Su-yi looked around. He felt like his heart was in a pot of oil. Lu Ruashi and Duguyama were unconscious in the sky. He was the only one awake in the huge mountain. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Whoosh! Whoosh! Su-yi's figure flew into the air, his face solemn, gritting his teeth. He turned into a ball of fire and rushed to Shangguan Tianqian's side. All of a sudden, a soul-shaking aura burst out from Su-yi's body. The ancient bell rang, and the chaos essence ancient bell's ferocious aura enveloped Su-yi and Shangguan Tianqian. Mysterious runes circled around his body. He looked up at the sky. The light was shaking and sinking at a terrifying speed. Duguyama and Lu Ruashi still didn't respond. Su-yi panicked. He immediately thought of Tunten, who was hiding in Lu Ruashi's body. He had asked Tunten to protect Lu Ruashi. Lu Ruashi had been on the peak of the mountain. Although she wasn't in danger, why wouldn't Tunten come out? Tunten! Su-yi roared. His eyes were solemn. Rolling heavenly aura surged out from the dark underground. The wind howled and the heaven and earth trembled. Rolling heavenly aura surged out from Su-yi's body. A sharp aura from his brows was searching for traces of Tunten. Su-yi, who had been connected to Tunten, suddenly felt that Tunten had fainted. Could it be that the rainbow egg's energy had restrained Tunten? Tunten, wake up! Tunten, wake up! Seeing the 2 rays of light getting closer and closer, A dazzling aura gushed out from between Su Yi's eyebrows amidst the violent wind. The rolling demonic aura of the Origin's supreme technique rushed towards the two rays of light. Boom! Su Yi circulated the primordial ancient bell while releasing the primordial supreme art. His forehead was covered in sweat, and his heart was already trembling to the extreme. At this moment, Su Yi couldn't wait for Tunten to wake up. When Su Yi saw the rainbow light descending like lightning, Su Yi's vision darkened. A black radiance enveloped the rainbow light. Bang bang! At the crucial moment, Tunten finally woke up. Su Yi shouted in joy, "Tunten! You're awake!" In the next second, Su Yi's expression changed again. Tunten, who had enveloped Lu Ruoxi and Duguyuma, was like an inflated black ball. Its body was expanding. Chapter 2393. Master, I feel like my soul is going to explode from the pressure. What kind of energy is this? The pressure is too great. Tunten, who had just woken up, felt that something was amiss and shouted frantically. In the sky, it was as if a meteorite was falling. The pressure in the air also increased abruptly. If there was someone with a lower cultivation level, their internal organs would immediately explode from the pressure. Dong! Like a falling star, Tunten let out an angry roar in the air. Her body twisted and landed on the chain, rolling towards Su Yi like a rolling ball. "Master, be careful!" Tunten roared. Her voice was like a spring that had collapsed. Seeing the huge Tunten rolling down the chain, if she hit the primordial ancient bell, not only would he be injured, Tunten and Ruoxiuma would also be seriously injured. Gulu gulu! The huge Tunten's body was still rapidly expanding under such high pressure. At the same time, as the speed of her fall increased, the entire mountain started to shake. Under such pressure, Su Yi, who was standing in the middle of the chain, could feel that the chain could not withstand such a violent impact. He could not help but gasp. This terrifying pressure was a huge threat to Su Yi and everyone else present. Suddenly, Su Yi took a deep breath and suddenly thought of the space-cracking jade in his arms. Since it was unavoidable, he would let Tunten go through with it. I have no choice but to take a gamble. It would be best if I could teleport out. Su Yi's lips curled. He took out the space-cracking jade and formed a hand seal. Immediately, a bright light burst out and aimed the light from the space-cracking jade at Tunten. "Bear with it, Tunten. Just one moment will do." Su Yi shouted at the top of his lungs as he looked at Tunten, who was rushing towards him like a meteorite. In the blink of an eye, Su Yi's hand seal was completed. Suddenly, a destructive force rushed towards the rolling Tunten. Bang bang! Under the terrifying force, the wind and waves in the void were unparalleled. The demon god battlesuit on Su Yi's body rustled in the wind. His flesh began to crack, and blood flowed out from the corners of his eyes and nostrils. The mysterious runes glowed brightly as they rushed out and enveloped Tunten perfectly. Tunten's body dissipated and the heavy pressure on the chains disappeared instantly. Boom! The world fell silent and everything disappeared in an instant. Have they been teleported out? Su Yi's eyes moved slightly as he scanned his surroundings. At this moment, a huge pressure came pressing down once again. Tunten's voice came from above his head once more. It turned out that Tunten had disappeared from the chains and fallen down from another spatial crack. "Master, save me!" Tunten, who was unable to control itself, roared wildly. Its round body had nowhere to borrow strength, making it difficult to handle. "Damn it! I can't even get out of the space-rending jade." Seeing Tunten falling down again, although Tunten was trying its best to control itself, its speed was still increasing. The hurricane expanded and the wind blew violently. Su Yi bellowed and his eyes darkened. Arrogance suddenly emerged from his forehead. He stomped his foot on the ground and no longer stood on the chains. His body charged up proudly as he said angrily, "I don't believe it. It's not that easy to die." Tunten, get ready. Tense up your entire body. Alright. Tunten took a deep breath. Its dark features were almost frowning together. Its super-strong aura of a 9th-tier demon domain realm cultivator gathered at one point. Bang bang! Flames broke through the sky, and the mighty aura could destroy heaven and earth. It was like the end of the world. Instantly, the spatial ripples shook again. Awo! Binding dragon, heavenly wind boundary. Golden dragon, sky-piercing finger. Rising wind, 100 transformation steps. Flying high in the sky, Su Yi's body was crushed above the void. Strong winds burst out from his body and shot into the sky. Immediately, 3 kinds of martial techniques that could tear open spatial rifts were executed by Su Yi. The heaven and earth trembled and the mountains roared. In the vast dark space, Su Yi's body created hundreds of illusions in the void. With the speed of lightning, he opened spatial rifts around Tunten in an attempt to slow down Tunten's fall. Waves of indescribable destructive energy poured out. Su Yi's body started to become blurry as the spatial rifts formed. However, Su Yi was still persevering. The corner of his mouth slowly lifted. Sweat poured down his back, and the veins on his thick red neck were exposed. His meridians were like green worms. Peepa! Very quickly, Su Yi's body started to explode. The pressure that had risen to 7,000 feet directly shattered Su Yi's skin layer by layer. The collapse of his body and the rebellion of his soul couldn't stop Su Yi from persevering. After Su Yi used the last binding dragon heavenly wind boundary, Tunten finally rolled into the primordial chaos ancient bell, like a round glass bead. Bam! After returning to the primordial chaos ancient bell, the destructive pressure finally disappeared. Su Yi knelt on the high platform in the center of the chains. Mouthful after mouthful of blood spurted out. His body was like mottled tree bark. He looked miserable and hideous as blood flowed out incessantly. What kind of terrifying destructive force was this? Not even Su Yi, a demonic paragon, could stand up to it. It should be noted that this place had only risen to 7,000 feet. If it really rose to 10,000 feet, then what would it mean when they reached the depths of the Earth's core? Ruashi Umo. Su Yi hurriedly spat out the blood in his mouth. His mind was filled with the thought of waking Ruashi and Umo up. He supported himself on the ground with both hands and quickly crawled to Ruashi's side. Umo, who was lying on the side, had already fainted. Tunten, who had transformed back into her human form, had a weak aura. Under such a terrifying pressure, Tunten, who was at the 9th stage of the demon domain and had been directly impacted by the explosion of the rainbow glass egg, was covered in wounds and had a weak aura. Lei Yun's eyes were filled with fatigue. Tunten glanced at Su Yi and fainted completely. She couldn't even speak. At this moment, the entire place was silent. It was so quiet that only Su Yi's heavy breathing could be heard. Ruashi. Ruashi. I'm Su Yi. I'm here. Look at me. Su Yi's eyes were red as he hugged Lu Ruashi, who was barely breathing, in his arms. He was so anxious that he was about to go crazy. Plop, plop. At this moment, the beating rainbow glass egg on Lu Ruashi's left chest was shining brightly. However, as Lu Ruashi's breathing slowed down, the rainbow glass egg dimmed at a visible rate. Su Yi, whose hands were covered in blood, held Lu Ruashi tightly in his trembling arms. At this moment, the pain in his body was nothing to him. However, Su Yi absolutely could not accept watching Lu Ruashi die right in front of him. I can save you, Ruashi. Hang in there. Hang in there. Su Yi, who was in a frenzy, roared. His body was agitated again, as if fresh liquid was squeezed out from a withered tree. He raised his head abruptly and shouted with blood flowing out of his mouth. Chapter 2394. Why? Is there any way to save my Ruashi? Su Yi's roar was like the roar of a lion in the forest. His voice split the clouds and pierced through the rocks. Su Yi's heart was filled with regret and panic. He rummaged through the dragon ancestor's medicine manual in his mind, but he couldn't save the rainbow glass egg. There was only a brief introduction to the rainbow glass egg in the dragon clan's medicine manual. Such a precious rainbow glass egg had lost its vitality. What in the world could save it? Ruashi, wake up! Ruashi! Seeing Ruashi's aura weakening, the corner of Su Yi's mouth sank. Large teardrops fell on Ruashi's cheek. Immediately, a dazzling light spread out from Su Yi's body. No one knew where Su Yi's vitality came from, but the energy surged wildly into the air. Origin Supreme Technique, Tianyuan Ancient Scripture, Yutian Palace, and powerful energy of heaven and earth entered Ruashi's body like a cardiac stimulant. Desperate times called for desperate measures, but it still couldn't stop her from weakening. Ah-ee! Suddenly, a voice came from beside him. It was Duguyuma, who had awakened from her coma. She sat up slowly. Her voice seemed to have a magical power that made Su Yi raise his head immediately. Su Yi's eyes were swollen and he was in a daze. He could only see stars in front of him. Su Yi struggled to support his body and tried to wake himself up. But from his cells to his flesh, blood, bones, and meridians, everything was telling him to fall asleep. Yuma! Su Yi couldn't suppress the fear in his heart. He tried to touch the figure in the light. In an instant, Su Yi's hand fell to the ground. Su Yi, who had lost all his strength, fell to the ground, unconscious. Silence and disillusionment. Inside the ancient bell, the chains floated. The spatial storm outside hit the ancient bell, producing terrifying sounds that made one's hair stand on end. Duguyuma, who had woken up from his coma, looked at the person he loved lying on the ground. His blue eyes were filled with sorrow. Duguyuma was the only one who was awake now. This was the Sword Mountain that Duguyuma had worshipped as a sacred mountain since he was young. But now, his beloved and sister were trapped here. Duguyuma walked to Ruashi, bent down, and slowly lifted her pale face. Looking at her beautiful face, Duguyuma smiled bitterly. Before the sword-shaped mountain gate, when Ruashi released the rainbow glass egg's power, she told him to take good care of Su Yi. Silly girl, why are you as impulsive as that guy? Duguyuma gently stroked Ruashi's face with his trembling fingers. It was as if he was looking at his own sister. As Duguyuma looked down, he saw the mystical seven-colored glass egg. It was glowing and had an ancient and vast presence in the seven-colored flowing light. This was the first time Duguyuma saw Ruashi's heart up close. The slow-beating blood vessels and nerves could be seen through her clothes. Staring at it, Duguyuma's expression became more painful. You used your life to save Su Yi, but I used my hard-earned trust to push Su Yi into the sea of fire. Duguyuma smiled and looked at Su Yi and Ruashi. At this moment there was no one around. Duguyuma's blue eyes revealed a trace of envy. Ruashi, I envy you. Do you know that? Holding Ruashi's right hand, Duguyuma's eyelashes fluttered. A drop of tear floated in the darkness. I never thought that I would fall in love with the same man as the others, but this is it. We all love that guy. I envy you for being his childhood friend. I envy Sister Goddess for being his pillar of support. I also envy Sister Cat Demon for being able to sleep with him. As she spoke, her eyes were filled with tears. Duguyuma lowered her head and pursed her lips. But only me. Why am I the only one who met him so late? Why did I have to leave you guys so early? Tears poured down like rain. Duguyuma couldn't control her emotions. The more she cried, the more uncomfortable she felt. Tears flowed down her cheeks silently. Su Yi, I hate you. Duguyuma raised his head and looked at Su Yi, who had fainted. He let out a suppressed sigh, and a sadness that came from the depths of his soul surged out. Why is it you? Why did you make me open my eyes? You gave me happiness, but you made me suffer more unbearable pain. Duguyuma's eyes turned even more blue as he spoke. His desperate eyes emitted an extreme blue light, and an invisible energy passed through space and fixed on Sui. I want to look at you like this. Sui, I like you. If there's a next life, you must remember to find me early. Duguyuma flicked away the tears at the corner of her eyes. She stared at the sleeping Ruashi without any emotion. Silly girl, it's your turn to take care of Sui in the future. Don't be so impulsive next time. If you die, he won't want to live anymore. Duguyuma gently scratched Ruashi's nose. In the next second, two majestic lights shot out from her eyes. Ugh! In the darkness, Duguyuma hugged Ruashi and shed her last tear. Then, an ice crystal pattern of crescent moons appeared between her eyebrows. At this moment, Duguyuma seemed to have returned to her childhood. Master, why didn't you let me open my eyes? The young Duguyuma waved her chubby body and stretched out her hands, looking for her master. Ah ha ha ha! In the sky, the sage-like Dugusien narrowed his eyes. His eyes shone with a bright light as he said softly, "Because your eyes are the purest of all. This world is too dirty. There are too many people who want this pair of eyes." Duguyuma flipped her two ponytails and complained, "But I can't always be blind. The sword art is connected to the spirit, and the heart moves at will. Only with the heart of nirvana can one cleanse the dusty great Tao. Yuma, if you find the one who can protect you for the rest of your life, or the one who deserves you to open your eyes for him, then open your eyes. But you have to remember that person's life is your life, and also your fortune. It's up to you how you want to deal with him." Chapter 2395. Dugusien looked at Duguyuma with a complicated expression. The airflow under his feet soared into the sky and spun around Duguyuma's head. Duguyuma stood on the ground and was illuminated by the setting sun. Her long eyelashes fluttered gently and her red face was filled with questions. As the sword chi flew away, Duguyuma could feel a glimmer of hope even with her eyes closed. "Will I meet such a person?" Duguyuma faintly said a sentence, and her small face swayed with a pink color. At this moment, the scene was pulled back to the 1,000-feet Sword Mountain. The surrounding energy was filled with cold energy, and the rocks on the ground were swaying like water. The translucent light patterns flowed around Duguyuma's body, and it was extremely profound. Duguyuma's fair skin became more and more translucent, like a piece of paper. Whoosh whoosh! The light that shot out from her eyes was dazzling and gradually condensed into a blue crystal airflow. It then rose into the sky and set off a fierce whirlwind above her head. A meek yet majestic aura poured out like the end of the world, enveloping Sui, Lu Ruashi, Shangguan Tianqian, and Tunten. The blue light that filled the sky intertwined with the primordial chaos ancient bell, as if the divine light of the 9 heavens was descending. Finally, the countless tiny specks of light above his head gradually converged into 2 white crescent moons. Rumble! The crescent moons began to spin faster, and at the same time, a terrifying scene appeared. The 2 crescent moons began to overlap in the sky, and the dazzling light shone on the world. The light within the ancient bell was dazzling. What followed was a refreshing feeling of life and the supreme majesty of the divine light. The pressure in the air also began to decrease because of this magical light. Duguyuma had already thought of risking his life in front of the sword-shaped mountain gate. However, Lu Ruashi was faster and there was no one around. Duguyuma's body was covered in dazzling blue light. Under the cover of the light, Duguyuma's body was noble and holy, as if a god was purifying the world. At this moment, the crescent moons completely overlapped above her head. Suddenly, heavenly thunder rumbled. The sharp and clear sound extended outwards, and a wave of hope descended upon the world. The crescent moon shattered, and light and shadow swept outwards, sweeping through heaven and earth. Sui, Duguyuma, Shangguan Tianqian, and Tunten were all in the midst of this divine light of life. Bathed in divine light, it was warm and peaceful. In the deep sky, light arcs were moving. Duguyuma let out a slight moan of pain from his throat, and his voice slowly drifted into the sky. Master, I've finally found the person you were talking about. In this world, there are things that I am reluctant to part with. Boom. The cold moonlight shone on the ground, and everything was renewed. The mysterious patterns on the chaos ancient bell also flickered. Duguyuma's face was as calm as snow. As her voice faded, Yuma's body became more and more transparent, like a thin layer of gauze. The light in her blue crystal twin moon eyes also began to turn serious. At this moment she found it difficult to speak. In the cold and distant white light, Duguyuma sat beside Su-I and Lu Ruashi. Her beautiful eyes moved slightly, and her face was calm as she looked at Su-I greedily. The wind in the sky was exceptionally lonely, and the light and shadow seemed to be from yesterday. During the Tianfeng battle, they met for the first time and were watched by millions of people. In the Gu Demon Forest, they risked their lives and fell in love with each other for the second time. Duguyuma smiled as she recalled those scenes in her mind. Her smile was as bright as fireworks. At this moment, she really wanted to talk to her sweetheart in front of her. The moon in her eyes was the light above her head, and the person in front of her was her sweetheart. Su-I, I like you so much. Before she could finish her sentence, her delicate face suddenly froze. A light blue light came out of Duguyuma's forehead and turned into a cloud. The cloud rose to the sky until it drifted between the crescent moon, filling the gap between the crescent moon and the emptiness in Duguyuma's heart. At the moment when the sky was full, Duguyuma's words stopped at the word like. She really wanted to stay and hug this man. The moonlight on the path was the only time they could be alone, and it also became their swan song. There were so many beautiful things in the world, and her love for Su-I was still so strong. Duguyuma didn't want to leave. She didn't want to leave the bright life. At the moment when Ing Hong's lips curled up, an even brighter light shot up to the sky. Duguyuma's transparent body was like a broken tile, and she floated in the air. The light scattered between heaven and earth. Duguyuma's delicate body turned into countless light spots and returned to the crescent moon. The light was dazzling, and it was like a miracle. In a split second, endless heavenly power spread between heaven and earth. Su-Yi's skin was healing rapidly, and the broken wounds were glowing with blue light. The blood stopped flowing instantly. On the other hand, the light spots on Lu Ruashi's colorful egg flickered slowly, and the light blue blood vessels and cells were full of vitality again. The colorful light overflowed on the heart, and it shone in the sky. The outline of the heart gradually disappeared, and everything returned to normal. Time passed slowly. The light disappeared into the darkness. At this moment, the 12 chains on Shangguan Tianqin's body broke. With a bang, he fell to the ground heavily. Tunton, who was beside him, fell into a deep sleep with its black belly open. The whole place was quiet, and only the crisp sound of the bell could be heard. Drowsy and confused, Su-Yi's spiritual sea was clear after bathing in the divine light. In his consciousness, Su-Yi could feel that Duguyuma was flying away in the blurry light. Yuma, it's over. Where are you going? In the vast space, Su-Yi stared at the pair of breathtaking blue eyes. He was full of doubts and howled. There was no response for a long time. Su-Yi wanted to get up, but he found that his hands and feet were tied to a tree. After a long time, a soft call came from afar. Take good care of Ruashi. If you bully her, I'll come back and beat you up. Hearing this, Su-Yi's entire body was covered in sweat. His pores opened and his eyes widened as he stared into the distance. At this moment, there was more and more white light in the surroundings. It rushed into his nose and he could not breathe. Ugh! In the dreamland, Su-Yi struggled crazily. Subconsciously, he felt that Duguyuma was no longer there. His heart was beating so fast that it almost jumped to his throat. Bang! The moment Su-yi broke free from the ropes, he sat up from the ground. Around him, the dim light of the ancient bell shone. Su-yi found that he was still in the Sword Mountain. Lu Ruashi fell asleep peacefully. Her breathing gradually stabilized. She let out a sigh of relief and wiped the sweat off her forehead. Suddenly, Su-yi felt like he was electrocuted. He looked around and saw Shangguan Tianchen and Tunten sleeping soundly. He had searched everywhere, but Duguyumal was missing. Chapter 2396. Huff, huff. Su-yi felt like his throat was being gripped tightly by someone. Looking at the scattered stars in the sky, Su-yi realized that the dream was real. Duguyuma seemed to have really left this beautiful world for him and Ruashi. Yuma, Su-yi choked and groaned. Thinking of the pair of captivating blue eyes in the dream, Su-yi suddenly felt like his internal organs were squeezed together. A heart-wrenching feeling of vomiting surged in his heart. Beside him, Lu Ruashi, Shangguan Tianchen, and Tunten were sleeping quietly. Su-yi was alone in this dark space, enduring this unbearable pain. Why are you so stupid? Su-yi's tears flowed endlessly like a broken dam. Su-yi's fingers were deeply embedded in the cracks of the black soil. All 10 of his fingers were broken, but Su-yi did not feel any pain. Resentment filled his heart. Su-yi kept shaking his head, unwilling to accept this fact. Looking at the scattered stars in the sky, Su-yi felt like a knife was twisting in his heart. Finally, he forced himself to accept this fact. She had just expressed her feelings for Duguyuma. How could such a pure and holy girl leave just like that? Swaying, Su-yi stood up as if he had lost his mind. Looking at the scattered stars in the sky, Su-yi felt that Duguyuma's unique fragrance still lingered, but the beauty was gone. Looking at the broken chains on the ground, Lu Ruashi and Tunten who were breathing calmly, and the wounds on his body had already healed. Although he was in the primordial ancient bell, the pressure of 7,000 feet had decreased. It was even lower than the original 5,000 feet. This was all thanks to Duguyuma. Su-yi was very grateful. Lu Ruashi didn't hesitate to use the rainbow egg's energy to save him, and Duguyuma risked his life to save him. A kind of bone-piercing coldness made Su-yi tremble all over. He was like a person standing in a world of ice and snow, without any perception or spiritual sense. It was as if everything had become dull and tasteless. She had passed away, and Su-yi didn't know if the thing he had been pursuing still existed. In his mind, the tree-lined path, the dome, the moonlight, the two of them. Countless scenes from yesterday tormented his soul like a nightmare. In the darkness, only Su-yi was awake. This kind of loneliness was tormenting Su-yi to the point of suffocation. Duguyuma's departure made Su-yi regret for the first time. In the past, he could do whatever he wanted and was omnipotent. Since he had transmigrated from Earth, he thought that he could do whatever he wanted with the primordial chaos supreme technique. Being alone, even if he was in danger, Su-yi would never be afraid. He believed that he would always be able to turn the tables around like a lone hero. This time, he had really lost his love. This kind of heart-wrenching feeling made Su-yi regret not giving Duguyuma a hug earlier. Even if it was to give this poor girl a strong warmth, it was what she needed, and he wanted to give it to her. Time flew, and it was already dusk. The last time they looked back at the small courtyard was actually a farewell. Duguyuma had once told Su-yi that she could wait. She could wait for Su-yi to cross the sea and come to pick her up to tread on the boundless light. At this moment, Su-yi's heart suddenly tightened. A mouthful of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His bloodshot eyes looked like a poor person without the will to live, only endless drowsiness. Because Su-yi couldn't wait any longer. This kind of pain made Su-yi feel like he was falling into the abyss. Flame? Sword Mountain? In Su-yi's eyes, this was not painful. His life was not up to the heavens. That was Su-yi's pride. However, Duguyuma's life was up to him, and she had passed away early. Biting his lips, Sui used all the cruel methods he could think of. Sitting alone at the edge of the platform, Sui's eyes were dull as he stared at the 2 moons that were still faintly visible on the ceiling. "Yuma, can you come back?" As he spoke, Sui's nose turned sour. He hammered his head hard like a rubber bucket. Sui's head was about to explode. Pain. A heart-piercing pain, a heart-tearing pain. "Take good care of Ruashi. If you bully her, I'll come back and beat you," Duguyuma said from afar. It was so touching. However, Sui couldn't help but cry when he thought that he would never hear it again. Sui had survived a mountain of blades and a sea of flames. He was the king of sky prides to outsiders. However, he was willing to be a child in front of his beloved. "I don't want to bully anyone. Yuma, can you come back?" As he spoke, he buried his head between his knees. The slight shaking in the darkness was the ultimate pain for this 20-year-old man. In just a few minutes, Sui had cried all the tears of his previous life, this life, and the next life. However, there was still no response from the space. Blue crystal double moon eyes, the most precious treasure in the human world. Duguyuma was the only one who had appeared in 1,000 years. When she disappeared, it turned into eternity. Master, Sui behind him, Tunten and Shangguan Tianqian were the first to wake up. They looked at Sui, who was on the high platform, and walked over quietly. Shangguan Tianqian was heavily injured and his footsteps were weak. Under Tunten's care, he managed to support himself and said, "Sorry for the trouble, Sui." Pausing for a moment, Sui's head was still buried in his knees. He sniffled and turned his head. His red eyes were filled with solemnity as he replied mechanically, "It's all right. You're too heavily injured. I'll give you a few more bottles of spiritual liquid later. Take care of yourself." Sui stood up and quickly landed beside Lu Ruashi without saying a word. "What's wrong with Sui?" Shangguan Tianqian frowned and asked in a low voice. Tunten shook her head. However, she had a bad feeling when she saw the condensed black and white double moon on the dome. Something big might have happened. As for what happened, Tunten didn't dare to say anything after seeing Sui's devastated look. Whoosh whoosh. The 2 bottles of spirit liquid shot towards Shangguan Tianqian and Tunten like arrows before stopping steadily. Shangguan Tianqian looked at the shards of the chains that had fallen to the ground. Shangguan Tianqian faintly sensed something when he was unconscious. He said faintly, "This is blue crystal double moon eyes." At this moment, Sui's voice was still trembling. He said seriously, "Cultivate well and see how we can get out. I'll go treat Ruashi." "Yes, master." Tunten gave Shangguan Tianqian a look and didn't say anything else. Immediately, the 2 of them supported each other to the other side of the high platform. Chapter 2397. Brother Stone, can you please tell us what happened? Shangguan Tianqian looked at Tunten. Tunten had a pretty good guess about Duguyuma's death. She frowned and said to Shangguan Tianqian, "Let's go. Sai, you have to tell us how you were captured. It's all because of you that we risked our lives." The 2 of them left. The ancient bell continued to rumble with wind and thunder. It was completely peaceful. Sui looked at Lu Ruashi, wiped his blood-stained hands on his body, and stroked Lu Ruashi's hair. Lu Ruashi was kind by nature. If she knew that Duguyuma had died for her, she would definitely die. "How can I lie to you? I can't even lie to myself." At this moment, Sui couldn't even smile bitterly. His heart was still throbbing with pain as if it was bleeding. Sui took a deep breath and helped Lu Ruashi up. Exchanging a life for a life, the force of nature of the blue crystal double moon eyes offset the life essence of the rainbow egg. Although Lu Ruashi was still unconscious and weak, she was basically fine. Sui couldn't let Duguyuma's kindness go to waste. Sui couldn't let anything happen to Lu Ruashi. This was also his way of remembering Duguyuma. After wiping her tears, Sui let out a sigh of relief. Sui shook his head gently and started to circulate the Origin Supreme technique. Huff huff. Sui put away the pain in his heart, held his breath, and started to treat Lu Ruashi's injuries. Tears still flowed from the corners of her eyes. Above the firmament, arcs of light flowed. Time seemed to have lost its meaning in the endless depths of the Earth's core. At this moment, Sui was concentrating on circulating his aura, treating Lu Ruashi with a terrifying energy. Between Sui's eyebrows, a bright golden-red flame pattern flashed. Demonic chi billowed, constantly spreading around Sui's body until it reached the light pillar in the sky and disappeared. Dazzling light flickered. No one knew how much pain Sui was feeling in his heart. The more he healed, the more it showed how much Sui loved Duguyuma. If he had a choice, Sui wished that they had never come to the Myriad Sword Alliance. As the light dimmed, a faint seven-colored stream of light once again enveloped the world around Lu Ruashi. The divine light was dazzling and surging. In less than a second, the rainbow light drew an arc in the sky before returning to Lu Ruashi's heart. Bang! Heaven and earth shook as the light of fireworks illuminated the dark mountain. Lu Ruashi's eyelashes trembled slightly as she looked at the unfamiliar surroundings with her deep, light brown eyes. Hiss! The pain in her head caused Lu Ruashi to lean back and fall into Sui's arms. Sui hugged Lu Ruashi and forced a smile. You're awake. Lu Ruashi was overjoyed to see Sui alive and well. Tears welled up in her eyes as she was in disbelief. Sui, is it really you? Lu Ruashi's nose was red as she turned around and hugged Sui tightly. She sobbed softly and said, I thought I would never see you again. Silly girl, how could I die so easily after how you treated me? Sui's voice was like water as he gently caressed Lu Ruashi's ears. Lu Ruashi nodded and suddenly pulled away to look at Sui. She lowered her head to look at herself and said, How did I get in? I only remember that I was anxious when I saw you trapped. Then, my heart ached so much that it felt like it was burning. Sui hugged Lu Ruashi again and rested his head on her shoulder. He said softly, The heavens knew that you couldn't bear to part with me, so they stimulated your potential and let you in. Lu Ruashi was skeptical. She frowned and said, Is that really the case? Ruashi, I want to tell you something. You have to be prepared. Sui choked with sobs as tears streamed down from the corner of his eyes and fell on Lu Ruashi's shoulder. Lu Ruashi's heart was warmed by Sui's hug. She didn't care where she was anymore. Say it, I'll listen to whatever you say. Lu Ruashi pursed her lips and smiled gently. After a long while, Sui still couldn't say those words. Sui didn't want to admit that Duguyuma had left him. You don't do stupid things for me anymore. If you die, I don't want to live anymore. Lu Ruashi suddenly covered Sui's mouth. Their cherry lips touched and a warm feeling was transmitted to Sui's heart. Lu Ruashi's crystal-clear eyes were filled with Sui. She opened her eyes slightly and looked at her sweetheart. Lu Ruashi said faintly, What death? I won't do it again. Sui was a little hesitant. Alright, why are you crying? You don't look like a hero to me. Only I'm allowed to cry in the future. Lu Ruashi smiled sweetly. Sui immediately wiped away his tears. He smiled and said, You're not allowed to cry either. If anyone dares to provoke my wife, I'll make sure that they'll suffer a fate worse than death. I'll make sure that they won't be able to see the sun in their next life. His ferocious look made Lu Ruashi laugh. Lu Ruashi kissed Sui's forehead again and said leisurely, That's my Sui. Lu Ruashi looked around and frowned. Sui, didn't Sister Yuma come in? I remember I pulled her in. Sui's heart skipped a beat. He nodded and said, No. She didn't come in. She was stopped by Duguhen. You know that the Myriad Sword Alliance won't give up on the Sword Immortal's disciple. I see. Lu Ruashi stood up and wrapped her arms around Su Yi's shoulders. She looked around and said, "Luckily, she didn't come in. I'll feel bad if Sister Yuma stays here." "Master." The rainbow light had attracted Tunten and Shangguan Tianqin's attention. Tunten only came up to them when the two of them stood up. "Tunten." Lu Ruashi pretended to be unhappy when she saw the round-headed Tunten running over. "You little rock, have you been with me all this time?" Tunten was embarrassed. It looked at Su Yi with its blue eyes as if to say that it was Su Yi's idea. "Don't blame him. I was worried about you. That's why I asked it to protect you." Tunten nodded and explained, "But sister-in-law, you're really amazing. You even knocked me out when you unleashed your potential. Only the two of you would scare me every day." Lu Ruashi smiled. She looked at Shangguan Tianqin and said softly, "Uncle Tianqin, you're finally out. I'm so happy that you're fine." Shangguan Tianqin moved his shoulders and looked at Lu Ruashi with a smile. "It's all thanks to Su Yi." Chapter 2398. Su Yi took a deep breath. The two moons were still hovering above his head as he softly asked, "How's your inspection going?" Shangguan Tianqin and Tunten smiled bitterly at each other. They told Su Yi that the 5,000 feet they were at should be at the original 7,000 feet depth. Although the speed of their descent was extremely slow, they did not know how long it would last. Tunten naturally did not explain the reason. As for the way out, Tunten scratched her head helplessly. "Even the two of you can't find a way?" Su Yi frowned as loneliness filled his eyes. If a third-layer Yuan domain expert and a ninth-layer demon domain expert were unable to find a way out of the 10,000 feet Sword Mountain, it would be difficult to get out. "Master, don't worry. We will think of another way. We will definitely be able to get out." Tunten looked at Su Yi's despondent appearance. The two moons hovered above their heads as a faint white light illuminated the world. Tunten immediately signaled to Shangguan Tianqin with her eyes. Shangguan Tianqin acknowledged before his gaze landed on Su Yi. He nodded and said, "Su Yi, we will definitely be able to get out. However, this 10,000 feet Sword Mountain has always been mysterious. It will take some time." Suddenly, Su Yi's eyes turned red. A low roar erupted from his throat as if he was hysterical. He said in a low voice, "I will think of a way myself." After speaking, Su Yi walked to the other side of the high platform. As he passed by the two moons, Su Yi's face tightened as sadness filled the corners of his eyes. He raised his head and walked to the edge of the primordial ancient bell. Bang bang! The wind was biting cold as the dark sword wind constantly battered the primordial ancient bell. The sound of metal chimes resounded through the clouds. Soon after, they struck the primordial ancient bell and left a deep mark before disappearing. In the darkness, a violent force swept out as energy undulations frantically rippled. Looking at the black space outside, it quickly became distorted under the terrifying collision of energy. The hidden space ripples could not withstand the destructive energy and exploded. "I can't stay here any longer. Draconis, I'm going to kill you." Clenching his fists, Su Yi's ferocious eyes were like an eagle's as he stared at the endless black space. Summoning the blood demon slaying God's sword, an extreme power of destruction exploded around him. He looked up and rushed out of the primordial ancient bell. "Su Yi!" Lu Ruashi exclaimed. Without the protection of the primordial ancient bell, the pressure in the surrounding space would increase rapidly. At this moment, Tunten stood in front of Lu Ruashi and said softly, "Sister-in-law, let Master go. There are some things that only he can accomplish." Lu Ruashi looked at Tunten and Shangguan Tianqin as if she did not fully understand. Her eyes flickered slightly, but she did not say anything. The three of them quietly watched as Su Yi fought with the sword winds of the 10,000 feet Sword Mountain. Bang! 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 The space around Su-yi continued to explode as black holes appeared around Su-yi. The shattered space ripples shot out like fireworks. In the dim space, if there was anything that could block it, it would have turned into dust. Su-yi waved the blood demon's sword and slashed it horizontally. Dense energy of heaven and earth burst out from between his eyebrows. A huge energy vortex gathered around Su-yi. No one knew what Su-yi was feeling at this moment. Even if he could not find a way, Su-yi wanted to use his own method to pay tribute to Duguyuma. He kept shouting as the energy exploded, causing deafening explosions to reverberate in the void. Lu Ruashi and Tunten were slightly moved by Su-yi's violence. Everyone could feel that Su-yi was discovering something. This destructive aura was enough to destroy anyone in the world. The violent factor hidden in Su-yi's heart was constantly being expressed. Suddenly, Lu Ruashi's moon-like eyes flickered and fluctuated continuously. She consciously chose not to disturb Su-yi. She sat on the high platform and quietly watched as Su-yi raged. On the other side, Tunten accompanied Lu Ruashi. Shangguan Tianqian began to size up the entire space. He touched his chin and looked suspiciously at the pale white moon pattern above his head. If what Tunten said is true, why does the pattern of the blue crystal moon still exist? Shangguan Tianqian looked back at Su-yi, who was getting more and more terrifying. He pouted and walked to the side, as if he was thinking about something. Shenzhen Gate. Spiritual birds and auspicious beasts were galloping, and strange peaks were stacked on top of each other. The huge sword-shaped peak towered into the clouds, and it was magnificent. The disciples guarding the foot of the mountain had already sent the news to Situ Luyun. Mu Yao and Gu Suxin had also rushed over after hearing the news. Situ Luyun, who had been waiting on the path at the back of the mountain for a long time, finally saw a tall youth covered in blood, and his aura was weak and scattered. Whoosh whoosh. 3 figures quickly flew to Situ Muyang's side. When Situ Luyun saw that his son was seriously injured, he immediately shouted, "Situ Muyang, aren't you in the Myriad Sword Alliance? What happened?" Situ Muyang relaxed his aura and his gaze fell on Situ Luyun. 2 lines of tears finally burst out from the corners of his eyes. He looked at Mu Yao and Gu Suxin and said softly, "Father, junior martial uncle." Mu Yao frowned and quickly stepped forward. She stared at Situ Muyang and asked him to continue, "Su-yi." Situ Muyang choked with sobs. His red eyes were like a rampaging beast. He stared fiercely in the direction where he came from and said angrily, "Grandpa set it up. Junior martial uncle died in the Myriad Sword Alliance." Blood spurted out. Hearing this, the 3 people all sucked in a breath of cold air. Mu Yao took a light step back, the corners of her mouth full of disbelief, and said with a miserable smile, "I don't believe it. Every time you say that Su-yi is dead, but every time he comes back alive." Whoosh! The golden rock's aura fluttered. Mu Yao shouted and turned into a golden light. Gu Suxin shouted behind her, "Mu Yao! Mu Yang!" Situ Luyun's voice interrupted Gu Suxin. She turned around and saw that Situ Muyang had fainted. Sect Master Su-yi seems to have detonated his blood essence. He needs to be treated immediately. I will investigate the matter regarding Su-yi. The 2 of them made a prompt decision and split up. Situ Luyun quickly carried Situ Muyang and rushed toward the Shenzhen Gate. The vital qi under Gu Suxin's feet surged, and she flew in the direction where Mu Yao had gone with a powerful force. In an instant, the Shenzhen Gate was in a panic. Situ Muyang's serious injury quickly attracted the attention of the sect's elders. The Shenzhen Gate's young sect master had detonated his blood essence to save Su-yi. A generation's genius had lost his life in the Myriad Sword Alliance. Situ Luyun's majestic voice came from the clean room. She shouted, "Quick! Send the news back to the Chaos region. Sacred Mountain, inform the Imperial Palace and get ready." Chapter 2399. Unlike before, the news of Su Yi's death in the Myriad Sword Alliance shocked the higher-ups of the Saint Mountain, Imperial Palace, Demon-Subduing Sect, and Chaos Territory. Imperial Palace. Following Elder Guyu, who came back after listening to Yun Zhongli's words, everyone in Yutian Palace believed Su Yi's death to be true. Su Yi is dead. What should we do now? Should I inform Palace Master Xiaoman? Luo Wuya looked troubled as he sat in the assembly hall, worried. Long Pashan shouted angrily and stood up. He was furious when he recalled the Myriad Sword Alliance's plot to frame Su Yi and kill Su Yi in Sword Mountain. We have Palace Master Xiaoman and Senior Qingtian. What are we afraid of? Now that Su Brat is dead, we naturally have to avenge him. Long Pashan glared at Elder Guyu, who was sitting at the head of the table. Long Pashan, Luo Wuya, and the others already knew that Duanmu Qingtian had returned to the burial frost ground and was being treated by the Ice Luan True God. Everyone's attention was focused on Elder Guyu. Guyue's eyes were gloomy. When he left the Myriad Sword Alliance, he had already discussed with Yun Zhongli that they would attack the Long family together once Yun Zhongli gave the order. Draconis, that bastard! How dare he come up with such a bullsh** reason? If I don't kill him, I, Guyue, am not a human. Guyu's eyes were cold, and his face was filled with pain and pity. He looked at the crowd and said, "Now that things have come to this, there's no need to make any more plans. I've already sent someone to inform Qingtian and Xiaoman, the two supremes. Pashan, gather all the soul ancestors in the Bawang sect and send them to the demon-subduing sect. Once Palace Master Xiaoman comes out, we'll attack the Long family." Yes. After receiving the order, all of the elders raised their heads and roared. At this critical juncture, the elders who had always cultivated their bodies and minds and were calm like water were all gushing with blood and battle intent. "Su Yi, are you really dead?" After everyone left, Guyue looked up at the void. The huge mysterious formation on the peak before the earthquake was slowly operating. The shocking scenes of Su Yi's past flashed through his mind. Guyue let out a long sigh, a trace of disbelief flashing across his shriveled face. Sacred Mountain. At dusk, the sky was filled with the glow of the sunset. Deep and serene, the waterfall that was 100 feet long slowly flowed down the smooth mountain wall. The red sun hung low in the sky in the distance, and the world was covered in a blood-red setting sun. "Have you heard?" Li Ling stood behind Xiahong Lu ever since she had returned from the Thunder Fire Temple. Xiahong Lu had been cultivating wholeheartedly. In just a short time, Xiahong Lu, who had just come out of seclusion, had already broken through to the second level of the Origin Ancestor realm. The aura of a saint ruler spread across the sky, and the sharp aura of metal shook the flying demon beasts in the sky until they cried out incessantly. Xiahong Lu nodded, a trace of seriousness flashing across his long and narrow eyes. He said softly, "I've heard, madam. Do you believe it? The Yutian Palace and the Yun family have already sent news, and it seems to be close to the truth." Li Ling's voice was low. She crossed her arms behind Xiahong Lu and said softly, "I also heard that Ruashi also." Before she finished speaking, Li Ling's voice began to sob. Whether she believed it or not, Lu Ruashi and Li Ling's relationship had been good since childhood, and Su Yi was the matchmaker between Li Ling and Xiahong Lu. Li Ling definitely couldn't accept such bad news. Xiahong Lu turned around. Under the setting sun, his broad body quickly hugged Li Ling and said seriously, "If no one in this world believes that kid, perhaps I will believe him too." Li Ling raised her head to look at Xiahong Lu with misty eyes. She only heard Xiahong Lu say, "Although I haven't heard of it, as long as I haven't seen that kid's corpse with my own eyes, I definitely won't believe that he died so easily. The Long family has endured for so long, and the fatal blow to Su Yi was too shocking. It caught everyone off guard." With that, Xiahong Lu wiped away Li Ling's tears and said seriously, "Get ready. The most terrifying war in the history of the Sky Barbarians is about to begin. That kid isn't here, but we have to follow his ideas and gather everyone's strength to fight against the Long family. Li Ling nodded softly and pressed her head against Xia Honglu's chest. With the setting sun and a beauty by his side, Xia Honglu's eyes were filled with a deep seriousness. Honglu, it doesn't matter if the news is true or not. When the day comes, I will be like Ruashi. If you live, I live. If you die, I won't stay alone. Li Ling looked at the gurgling water in the mountains with determination. The milky white flying jades and pearls were so holy and beautiful. Nothing will happen to anyone. Just wait for that kid to return. Xia Honglu took a deep breath. As the sun slowly set, the two of them gradually disappeared into the sky. In the demon-subduing sect, a few days passed quickly. All the soul ancestors and martial ancestors of the Imperial Palace had finally gathered together. In the Overlord Legion, the soul ancestors and martial ancestors had finally joined forces. In addition to the Celestial Demon Legion that had been cultivating in the demon-subduing sect, the core strength of the Bawang sect had finally gathered together. Old sect leader, take a look. Everyone is here. Scarlet Stellar Leopard looked at Qi Feihong, who had come back from the dead. His entire body trembled as he nervously handed over the list of people to Xia Honglu. After a quick calculation, the Overlord Legion had about 50 to 60,000 people. In addition to the Celestial Demon Legion's 50 to 60,000 people, all of them had undergone strict training. Compared to ordinary people, it wasn't a big problem to increase their strength by 3 to 4 times. In addition to the strength of the demon-subduing sect itself, Qi Feihong alone could command several million people. Standing to the side, Qi Dongjue and Qi Jiuzhen were also in fear and trepidation. Qi Feihong's reputation in the previous generation of the demon-subduing sect was like the Big Dipper. In front of Qi Feihong, even Qi Dongjue didn't dare to be impudent. The obedient Qi Jiuzhen's eyes were red. She pouted and said with grievance, "Grandpa Feihong, is Su-yi really dead?" Qi Feihong, who was concentrating on looking at the name list, immediately flew into a rage. A ferocious aura erupted from him, and a ferocious gale swept towards Qi Jiuzhen. Qi Feihong swept his sleeve when he saw Qi Jiuzhen's shocked expression. His thin and small body trembled slightly as he said coldly, "It's Jiuzhen." Qi Feihong said faintly. Qi Jiuzhen was also a little dazed by Qi Feihong's temper. She said softly, "Su-yi isn't dead. Don't say that in the future." "But I heard from them that it seems to be true." Qi Jiuzhen's tears fell like rain. Before she could finish, she started sobbing again. Qi Feihong slammed the table and stood up. He glared at the Scarlet Astral Leopard and Qi Dongjue and roared, "Motherf ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* nonsense are you spreading? Hurry up and get ready. The Long family's battle is about to begin. Yes, yes, yes. Chi Dongjue immediately nodded and bowed. His face was ashen as he pulled the scarlet astral leopard and Chi Jiuzhen out of the hall. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.